The moment Marissa Vaughn showed up at his door, soaking wet with a duffel bag and $20 million on the line, Ethan Cole knew his quiet life was over. She had 8 hours to find a husband or lose everything. He had 30 days until foreclosure. What started as a desperate arrangement became something neither of them could fake, a marriage that was supposed to end before it began, but instead rewrote every rule they thought they knew about trust, power, and what it means to build something that lasts. If you want to see how far a lie can go before it becomes the truth, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Ethan Cole had learned to measure his life in small victories. A daughter who laughed at breakfast, an invoice paid on time, the occasional night when he didn't wake up calculating how many months until the bank took everything. Tonight was supposed to be one of those nights. Simple, quiet, safe. He had just finished reading to Sophie, his 7-year-old, tucked her in with the worn blanket she'd had since she was 2, and kissed her forehead the way he did every night, 3 times, because that was their ritual. She smiled in her sleep, and for a moment Ethan felt like maybe he was doing something right in a world that kept telling him otherwise. The knock came at 9:47 p.m. Not the friendly neighbor knock, not the delivery guy running late. This was different, controlled, urgent, the kind of knock that came with consequences already in motion. Ethan paused at the bottom of the stairs, listened, then moved toward the door. Through the frosted glass, he saw the outline of someone standing in the rain. No umbrella, no hesitation. He opened the door. Marissa Vaughn stood on his porch like a ghost from another dimension, soaked through, hair plastered against her face, mascara smudged beneath eyes that hadn't seen sleep in who knows how long. She carried a leather duffel bag in one hand and something heavier in her expression. Ethan had seen her before, of course. Everyone in the construction world knew Marissa Vaughn. She was the one who showed up to job sites in tailored suits and steel-toed boots, who could argue a contractor into submission and still have them thank her afterward. She was sharp, untouchable, the kind of woman who didn't need anyone. But the woman standing in front of him now wasn't that person. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice steady but frayed at the edges. "I need to come inside." Ethan didn't move. "It's late." "I know. My daughter's asleep." "I know that too." He should have closed the door. Should have told her to call in the morning, make an appointment, go through proper channels. But there was something in the way she stood there, not demanding, not entitled, just desperate in a way that felt honest. He stepped aside. She walked past him, water dripping onto the hardwood floor, and set the duffel bag down by the couch. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at the small living room. The mismatched furniture, the crayon drawings taped to the wall, the half-assembled toys Sophie had left scattered on the rug. "You have a nice home," Marissa said quietly. "It's not much." "It's more than you think." Ethan closed the door, locked it, and turned to face her. "What's going on?" Marissa took a breath, the kind that comes before a confession or a breakdown. Then she said the sentence that didn't belong in his world. "I need a husband by tomorrow." Ethan blinked, waited for the punchline. It didn't come. "I'm sorry. What?" "I need a husband," she repeated, slower this time, like she was still trying to convince herself it was real. "By tomorrow morning. Legally binding, documented, real." Ethan crossed his arms. "Is this some kind of—" "It's not a joke." Her voice cracked, just barely. "I wouldn't be here if it was." He studied her face, the exhaustion, the fear, the absolute lack of anything resembling humor. Whatever this was, she believed it. "Okay," he said carefully. "Why?" Marissa's jaw tightened. "Because my stepbrother is trying to take my company, and the only thing stopping him is a clause in my father's trust that says I have to be married to maintain control." Ethan stared at her. "That's insane." "It's legal. Doesn't make it sane." "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." The rain drummed against the windows. Somewhere down the hall, Sophie shifted in her sleep, and Ethan's instinct was to check on her, to make sure the stranger's presence hadn't disturbed the one thing in his life that still felt pure. But he didn't move. "Why me?" he asked. Marissa met his eyes. "Because you're outside my world. You don't want shares. You don't want power. You don't want leverage. You don't know what I want. I know you're 3 months behind on your mortgage, she said, not cruelly, just factually. I know your workshop is hemorrhaging money because your biggest client pulled out last quarter. I know you've been trying to hold this together alone since your wife died. Ethan's chest tightened. You've been digging. I had to. That doesn't make it okay. I know. She didn't apologize, didn't try to soften it. But I needed someone who wouldn't destroy me when this is over. When, not if. Ethan turned away, ran a hand through his hair, and tried to think like the man he used to be. The one who made decisions based on logic, not desperation. But logic didn't pay mortgages. Logic didn't keep Sophie's school funded or put food on the table. How much? He asked. Marissa hesitated. I'm not offering money. He turned back to her, surprised. Then what are you offering? Work, she said. Real work, market rate. Documented contracts. Your workshop handles renovations for 3 of my properties over the next 6 months. You get paid what you're worth, not what I think you'll settle for. Ethan's mind started calculating automatically. 3 properties, 6 months, market rate. That would cover the mortgage, cover Sophie's school, cover the creditors breathing down his neck, but it wouldn't cover the cost of lying. And when it's over? He asked. We file for divorce. Quiet, clean, no drama. You go back to your life. I keep my company. That's simple. That's simple. That... Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same thing he saw in himself every morning in the mirror. Someone trying to hold something together with sheer will and duct tape. What happens if your stepbrother finds out it's fake? Then I lose everything, Marissa said flatly, and you get dragged into a legal nightmare that could destroy your reputation and your business. That's not exactly a selling point. I know. So why would I do this? Marissa's expression softened just slightly. Because you understand what it's like to fight for something that matters. Ethan's throat tightened. He thought about Sophie, about the house, about the workshop that had been his father's before it was his, about the life he was barely keeping alive. How long do I have to decide? He asked. Now. Now? The trust activates at midnight tomorrow, Marissa said. If I'm not married by then, Caleb takes over. He'll dismantle everything my father built. Everything I've spent 10 years protecting. Ethan's mind raced. Marriage licenses take time, background checks, waiting periods. I have a lawyer who can expedite it, but we need to start tonight. Tonight? Yes. Ethan looked toward the stairs where Sophie slept, oblivious to the storm about to crash into their lives. Then he looked back at Marissa, standing in his living room like a stranger, asking him to jump off a cliff and trust she'd catch him. He didn't trust her, but he understood her. If we do this, he said slowly, we do it right. No shortcuts, no lies we can't back up. If anyone asks, we tell the same story. We know each other's details. We make this believable. Marissa nodded. Agreed. And my daughter doesn't get dragged into this. Whatever happens, she stays out of it. Of course. Ethan took a breath, feeling the weight of what he was about to say. Then you'll have to move in tonight. Marissa's eyes widened. What? If we're married tomorrow, we can't have you showing up here for the first time the day after, Ethan said. It has to look like we've been together, like this was building towards something. That means you're already here. She stared at him, processing. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay. Okay, Ethan echoed, and just like that, the lie became real. They spent the next hour building a life that didn't exist. Ethan made coffee, strong, black, the way he always did when he needed to think, and Marissa sat at his small kitchen table with a notebook, writing down details like she was preparing for a deposition. How long have we known each other? She asked. 6 months, Ethan said, leaning against the counter. You hired my workshop to renovate the office building on 4th Street. That's too recent for marriage. Not if we're in love. Marissa glanced up at him, something unreadable in her expression. Are we? In the story, yes. And in reality? We're 2 people trying to survive, Ethan said. That's the only truth that matters. She didn't argue. They built the timeline carefully. First meeting, first conversation, the moment Ethan supposedly asked her to dinner. Marissa suggested a restaurant she actually frequented, a detail that would hold up under scrutiny. Ethan countered with the idea that they'd kept it private because of her public profile, which explained why no one had seen them together. "What do I drink?" Marissa asked. "Coffee, 2 sugars, no cream." She blinked. "How did you set—" "You had a cup on your desk the one time I met you at the office," Ethan said. "You stirred it 3 times before you took a sip." Marissa stared at him, something shifting behind her eyes. "You notice details." "It's what I do." "Good," she said quietly. "We'll need that." They kept going. Favorite foods, pet peeves, the little things that made a relationship feel lived in. Ethan told her about Sophie's bedtime routine, the way she liked her toast cut diagonally, how she asked questions about her mother sometimes, and he never knew the right answers. Marissa listened without interrupting, without offering platitudes, and Ethan appreciated that more than he expected. "What about you?" he asked. "What do I need to know?" Marissa hesitated. "I don't sleep much. I work late. I'm not good at asking for help." "It's not a detail. That's a warning." A faint smile crossed her face. "Consider yourself warned." By midnight, they had a story that could hold up under questioning. By 1 a.m., they had a plan for the morning: courthouse, notary, witnesses if needed. By 2 a.m., Marissa was asleep on Ethan's couch, still fully dressed, her phone clutched in one hand like a lifeline. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching her breathe, and wondered what the hell he'd just agreed to. Then he went upstairs, checked on Sophie one more time, and tried to sleep. He didn't. Morning came too fast. Ethan woke to the sound of Sophie's footsteps on the stairs, her voice calling out for breakfast. He dragged himself out of bed, threw on a shirt, and headed downstairs, only to find Marissa already in the kitchen, pouring orange juice into a cup. Sophie stood frozen in the doorway, staring. "Daddy?" she said slowly. "Who's that?" Ethan's heart stopped. Marissa turned, and for a moment he saw panic flash across her face. Then she smiled, soft, careful, the kind of smile that didn't promise anything, but didn't lie either. "Hi," Marissa said gently. "I'm Marissa. I'm a friend of your dad's." Sophie looked between them, suspicious in the way only 7-year-olds could be. "Why are you here?" "I had some work to talk to your dad about," Marissa said. "We were up late, so he let me sleep on the couch." It wasn't a lie, not exactly. Sophie seemed to accept this, or at least decided it wasn't interesting enough to argue about. "Can I have pancakes?" "Sure, sweetheart," Ethan said, moving past Marissa to the stove. "Go wash your hands." Sophie ran off, and the moment she was gone, Marissa exhaled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have stayed upstairs." "It's fine," Ethan said, pulling out the pancake mix. "Better she sees you now than later." "Does she know?" "No. And she won't." Marissa nodded, then moved to help without being asked, pulling out plates, setting the table, pouring syrup into a small bowl. It was strange, watching her move through his kitchen like she belonged there, and Ethan had to remind himself it was temporary. Everything was temporary. Sophie came back, climbed into her chair, and watched Marissa with open curiosity. "Are you pretty?" Marissa blinked. I don't know. Am I?" "I think so," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "You have nice hair." "Thank you. But it's wet. It was raining last night." "Did you bring an umbrella?" "No." Sophie frowned. "That's silly. You'll get sick." Marissa smiled, and for the first time since she'd shown up at his door, Ethan saw something genuine in her expression. Not the corporate mask, not the desperation, just a woman trying to connect with a kid. "You're right," Marissa said. "I should have brought an umbrella." "Next time," Sophie said seriously. "Next time," Marissa agreed. Ethan flipped the pancakes, stacked them on a plate, and set them in front of Sophie. She drowned them in syrup, took a huge bite, and grinned. "These are good, Daddy." "Thanks, sweetheart." Sophie looked at Marissa. "Do you want some?" "I'd love some," Marissa said. And just like that, The morning felt almost normal. Mobbed. At 8:30 a.m., Ethan's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, saw Marissa's lawyer's name, and answered. "Mr. Cole," the lawyer said briskly, "we have a problem." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "Caleb Vaughn filed for an emergency compliance inspection this morning. He's claiming Ms. Vaughn violated fiduciary protocols and is demanding a full audit before the trust clause activates." "Can he do that?" "Technically, yes. It's a stalling tactic, but it's legal." Ethan looked at Marissa, who had gone pale. "How long will it take?" "The inspection? 4 to 6 hours, maybe more if he drags it out. The courthouse closes at 5. "I know." Ethan's jaw tightened. "So what do we do?" "You proceed as planned," the lawyer said. "Get to the courthouse. I'll handle Caleb. And if the inspection runs long, then we're out of time." The line went dead. Ethan set the phone down, looked at Marissa, and saw the same thing he'd seen last night. Fear, barely contained. "He knows," she said quietly. "He suspects." "Same thing." "No," Ethan said. "Suspicion isn't proof. We stick to the plan." "Ethan, we stick to the plan." Marissa stared at him, then nodded. "Okay." By 9 a.m., Sophie was at school, and Ethan and Marissa were in his truck, driving toward the courthouse. The inspection had already started, Caleb's team tearing through Marissa's office, looking for anything they could use. "They won't find anything," Marissa said, more to herself than to him. "You sure? I've been preparing for this for months." "Then why does he think he'll win?" Marissa's hands tightened in her lap. "Because he always does." Ethan didn't respond. He just drove. The courthouse was busy, people filing paperwork, lawyers huddling in corners, couples waiting for their turn. Ethan and Marissa stood in line, silent, and when their number was called, they stepped forward together. The clerk looked bored. "Purpose of visit?" "Marriage license," Ethan said. The clerk handed them a form. "Fill this out. Bring it back with ID and payment." They filled out the form at a small table in the corner, their handwriting side by side, making promises on paper that neither of them fully believed. When they returned to the counter, the clerk processed the paperwork, stamped it, and handed them a receipt. "You'll need to wait 3 days before the ceremony," she said. Ethan's heart stopped. 3 days? State requirement. "We don't have 3 days." The clerk shrugged. "Then you'll have to go somewhere else." Marissa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face went white. "The inspection's running long," she whispered. "They're questioning every transaction from the last 2 years." Ethan looked at the clock. 11:47 a.m. They didn't have 3 days. They didn't even have 3 hours. "There has to be another way," Ethan said as they sat in the truck outside the courthouse. Marissa stared at her phone, scrolling through messages from her lawyer. "There isn't. There's always another way. Not this time." Ethan's mind raced. 3-day waiting period, courthouse closed at 5, inspection running long. The math didn't work, unless... "What about a notary?" he asked. Marissa looked up. "What?" "A notary public. They can witness signatures, certify documents. If we can find one who'll marry us outside normal hours..." "That's not how it works." "It could be." Marissa stared at him. "You're serious? Do you have a better idea?" She didn't. Ethan pulled out his phone, started searching. Most notaries kept regular business hours, but there were a few who advertised late-night services, usually for emergencies, legal filings, estates. He found one. "Open until midnight," Ethan said, showing her the screen, above a diner on 5th Street. "That's our only option." Marissa took a breath. "Okay." As the inspection dragged on, Marissa spent the afternoon on her phone, answering questions from her lawyer, fielding calls from board members who wanted to know what the hell was going on. Ethan stayed quiet, drove her to the office so she could make an appearance, prove she wasn't hiding. Caleb was there, of course. He stood in the lobby like he owned it, arms crossed, smile sharp. When he saw Marissa, his expression didn't change. "Marissa," he said smoothly, Busy day? Always. I heard you're getting married. Ethan felt Marissa stiffen beside him. Congratulations, Caleb continued. Who's the lucky guy? Marissa didn't hesitate. Ethan Cole, my contractor. Caleb's eyes flicked to Ethan, and for a moment there was something cold in his gaze, calculation, assessment, dismissal. A contractor, Caleb said. How practical. I think so, Marissa said. When's the wedding? Tonight. Caleb's smile widened. Rushing, aren't we? When you know, you know. Ethan didn't say a word. He just stood there, hand resting lightly on Marissa's lower back, and met Caleb's eyes without flinching. Caleb looked away first. Well, he said, I hope it works out. It will, Marissa said. They left before Caleb could say anything else. By 8 p.m., the inspection was over. Marissa's lawyer called with the news. Everything checked out. No violations, no grounds for delay. But the courthouse was closed. They had one option left. Ethan drove to Fifth Street, parked in front of the diner, and looked up at the second-floor window where a faded sign read, Notary Services by appointment. This is it, he said. Marissa stared at the building. This is insane. Yeah. We're really doing this. Yeah. She took a breath, then opened the door and stepped out into the night. The notary was a woman in her 60s named Dolores, who didn't ask questions and didn't seem surprised when Ethan and Marissa showed up asking to be married at 9 p.m. You got the license? She asked. Ethan handed it over. Dolores examined it, nodded, and pulled out a stamp. You need rings. Ethan hesitated. He hadn't thought about rings. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the one thing he'd carried every day since his mother died. A simple gold band, worn smooth, engraved with initials he'd memorized as a kid. He held it out to Marissa. She stared at it, then at him. Ethan, it's temporary, he said quietly. Just for tonight. Marissa took the ring, and when she slid it onto her finger, something shifted in the air between them. It didn't feel temporary anymore. Dolores cleared her throat. You ready? They nodded. She spoke the words, short, legal, binding, asked if they took each other. They said yes. At 9:03 p.m., Dolores stamped the certificate and handed it back. Congratulations, she said. You're married. Ethan looked at Marissa. Marissa looked back, and neither of them knew what to say. They were halfway back to the truck when Marissa's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her face went hard. Caleb's calling an emergency board meeting, she said. Tonight, at my house. Your house? He wants to see proof, wants to see us together. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then let's give him proof. They drove to Marissa's mansion in silence. When they arrived, Ethan stepped out of the truck and looked up at the house. Massive, cold, lifeless. It looked like a museum, not a home. How long do we have? He asked. An hour? Maybe less. Then we need to make it look like I live here. Marissa blinked. What? If we just got married, I've been staying here, Ethan said. That means my stuff is here. My presence is here. He didn't wait for her to argue. He went back to the truck, grabbed the duffel bag he'd packed that morning, just in case, and carried it inside. Marissa followed, watching as Ethan moved through her house like he was mapping a blueprint. He set his boots by the front door, put his jacket on the coat rack, placed a coffee mug in the cabinet like he'd used it that morning, left his razor in the bathroom, small things, details, the kind of things that made a lie look lived in. When he was done, he stood in the living room and looked at Marissa. Where do you want me when he gets here? Beside me, she said quietly. Okay. 30 minutes later, Caleb arrived. He walked in like he owned the place, 2 board members trailing behind him, all of them dressed like they were heading to a funeral. Caleb's eyes swept the room, landed on Ethan's boots by the door, and his smile faltered, just for a second. Marissa, he said smoothly. And Ethan, was it? That's right, Ethan said. Congratulations on the wedding. Thank you. Caleb's gaze sharpened. Must have been quite the whirlwind romance. When you know, Ethan said, echoing Marissa's words from earlier. Caleb's smile didn't reach his eyes. And you're living here now? I am. Convenient. Ethan didn't flinch. I'd call it practical. Marissa stepped forward, hand finding Ethan's. Is there a reason you're here, Caleb? Just wanted to congratulate you both in person, Caleb said. Make sure everything's legitimate. It is. Good. Caleb turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Ethan? Welcome to the family. The words felt like a threat. When the door closed behind him, Marissa exhaled. He doesn't believe us, she whispered. I know. He's going to keep digging. Let him. Marissa looked at Ethan, something raw in her expression. Why are you doing this? Because I said I would. That's not an answer. Ethan met her eyes. Because I know what it's like to fight for something that matters. And I'm not walking away. For a long moment, Marissa didn't move. Then she stepped closer, rested her forehead against his shoulder, and whispered, Thank you. Ethan didn't say anything. He just stood there, holding her in the middle of a house that felt too big and too empty, and wondered if maybe, just maybe, they'd survive this after all. The house felt different after Caleb left, colder somehow, despite the expensive heating system that kept every room at a perfect 72 degrees. Marissa stood in the center of her vast living room, still holding the marriage certificate like it might dissolve if she let go. Ethan watched her from near the window, his reflection barely visible in the dark glass. He'll be back, Marissa said finally, breaking the silence that had settled between them like dust. I know. With lawyers, investigators, he'll tear apart every detail until he finds something. Ethan turned away from the window. Then we make sure there's nothing to find. Marissa looked at him, exhaustion written in every line of her face. You don't understand how Caleb operates. He doesn't just look for mistakes, he creates them. He'll push and prod until we slip up, and then he'll use that moment against us for everything it's worth. So we don't slip up. It's not that simple. It never is, Ethan said, moving closer. But we made a choice tonight. We can either commit to it completely or walk away now. There's no middle ground. Marissa's fingers tightened around the certificate. If we walk away now, I lose everything. And if we stay, we might lose everything anyway. The truth hung between them, heavy, unavoidable. Ethan thought about Sophie, asleep at his neighbor's house, trusting him to make the right choices. He thought about his workshop, the contracts Marissa had promised, the mortgage that wouldn't wait for him to figure out his moral compass. I need to get back, he said quietly. Sophie's with Mrs. Chen, but I don't like leaving her overnight unless I have to. Marissa nodded, setting the certificate on the marble coffee table. Of course. I'll have my driver take you. I have my truck. Right. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking small in the cavernous room. Will you come back tomorrow? The question caught him off guard. You want me to? Caleb will expect it. If you're my husband, you should be here in the mornings, at least until things settle. Ethan studied her face, searching for something beyond the strategy, beyond the careful planning. He found only uncertainty, the same kind he felt churning in his own gut. I'll bring Sophie by after school, he said. She should see this place if I'm supposedly living here. That's not necessary. Yes, it is. Kids notice things. If I tell her I'm staying somewhere and she never sees it, she'll ask questions I can't answer. Marissa's expression softened. You're good at this. At lying to my daughter? At protecting her. The distinction felt paper thin, but Ethan didn't argue. He just grabbed his jacket from the rack, the one he'd deliberately hung there an hour ago, and headed for the door. Ethan? He paused, hand on the doorknob. Thank you, Marissa said, for not running. Night's not over yet, he replied, and left before she could see the doubt in his eyes. The drive home took 20 minutes through empty streets, and Ethan spent every second of it questioning his sanity. He'd married a woman he barely knew to save a company he didn't care about, all for the promise of work that might never materialize. The logical part of his brain screamed that he was an idiot. The desperate part reminded him that idiots with paid mortgages still came out ahead. Mrs. Chen was waiting when he pulled into his driveway, her kind face creased with concern in the porch light. Everything okay? She asked as Ethan climbed out of the truck. Yeah, just work ran late. Sophie was perfect, as always. She's asleep in your bed, didn't want to sleep alone. Guilt twisted in Ethan's chest. Sophie only climbed into his bed when she was worried, when some instinct told her that things weren't quite right. Thanks for watching her, Mrs. Chen. Any time, dear. You know that. She paused at the edge of the porch. That woman who was here this morning, is everything all right with that situation? Ethan forced a smile. Just a work thing. Nothing to worry about. Mrs. Chen didn't look convinced, but she was too polite to push. Well, you know where I am if you need anything. After she left, Ethan locked up and climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. He found Sophie exactly where Mrs. Chen had said, curled up in the center of his bed, clutching the stuffed elephant he'd won for her at a fair 2 summers ago. He sat on the edge of the mattress, careful not to wake her, and just watched her breathe. 7 years old. Still young enough to believe her father could fix anything. Still innocent enough to trust that the world was mostly good. He'd do anything to keep that innocence intact, even if it meant becoming someone he didn't quite recognize. I'm sorry, sweetheart, he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. I'm going to make this work. I promise. Sophie shifted in her sleep, murmuring something about pancakes, and Ethan felt his throat tighten. He carefully lifted her, carried her back to her own room, and tucked her in properly. 3 kisses on the forehead, their ritual, his promise that even when everything else changed, this stayed constant. Sleep didn't come easy. Ethan lay in his own bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to map out all the ways this could go wrong. Caleb would investigate. He'd find the rushed timeline, the convenient paperwork, the fact that Ethan and Marissa had barely known each other before yesterday. He'd question Ethan's motives, Marissa's judgment, the legitimacy of a marriage built in less than 24 hours. And the worst part? Every accusation would be true. Around 3 in the morning, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Marissa. Caleb's hired a private investigator. They'll be at your workshop tomorrow. He stared at the message, then typed back. Let them look. We haven't done anything illegal. Her response came immediately. Legality isn't the same as believability. Ethan didn't have an answer for that, so he set the phone down and tried to sleep. He managed about 90 minutes before Sophie's alarm went off, signaling the start of a day he wasn't ready for. Morning arrived with Sophie's usual energy, questions about breakfast, complaints about math homework, excited chatter about a field trip next week. Ethan moved through the routine on autopilot, making toast, checking her backpack, reminding her to brush her teeth twice. Daddy, you're quiet today, Sophie observed as they drove to school. Just tired, sweetheart. Is it because of that lady? Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. What lady? The pretty one from yesterday, Marissa. What about her? Sophie shrugged, swinging her legs beneath the seat. I don't know. You seemed different after she came. The kids. They saw everything. She's just someone I'm working with, Ethan said carefully. Nothing for you to worry about. Okay. Sophie accepted this with the easy faith of childhood. Can we have spaghetti for dinner? Sure thing. He dropped her off at school, waited until she disappeared through the doors, then drove to his workshop with a knot of anxiety in his stomach. The investigator was already there when he arrived, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s standing beside a black sedan, holding a clipboard. Mr. Cole? She called as Ethan got out of his truck. That's me. I'm Rebecca Torres. I've been hired to conduct a routine background check regarding your recent marriage to Marissa Vaughn. Marissa Vaughn. Routine. Right. What do you need? Ethan asked, unlocking the workshop door. Just a few questions. Won't take long. They sat in his cramped office, him behind the desk littered with invoices and blueprints, her in the only other chair, recording device set between them. How long have you known Ms. Vaughn? Rebecca asked. About 6 months. Met her on a job site. And when did the relationship become romantic? Ethan had rehearsed this with Marissa, but saying it out loud to a stranger felt different, more real, more wrong. 3 months ago. We kept it quiet because of her public profile. No one saw you together during those 3 months? We were careful. Why the rush to get married? When you know, you know. Rebecca's pen paused mid-scratch. That's the second time I've heard that phrase in 12 hours. Ethan met her eyes steadily. Maybe because it's true. Or maybe because it's rehearsed. You can believe whatever you want. Doesn't change the facts. Rebecca leaned back, studying him like he was a blueprint she couldn't quite decipher. You're in significant debt, Mr. Cole. Mortgage 3 months overdue, business accounts in the red. Some might say marrying a wealthy woman is convenient timing. Some might? I'd say I fell in love with someone who happens to be successful. Last I checked, that wasn't a crime. It's not. But fraud is. The word hung in the air like smoke. I'm not committing fraud, Ethan said quietly. I married Marissa because I care about her. The rest is just noise. Noise that benefits you financially. She offered me work, market rate, documented contracts. If I'd wanted money, I could have asked for a lot more. Rebecca made another note. Where were you last Tuesday night? The question came out of nowhere, and Ethan had to think. Tuesday, 5 days ago, before any of this started. Home with my daughter, made dinner, helped with homework, read her a story. Anyone who can verify that? My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, she stopped by around 7 with some mail that got delivered to her place by mistake. Rebecca nodded, scribbled something. And you're comfortable raising your daughter in this arrangement? Ethan's jaw tightened. My daughter is none of your concern. She's very much my concern if this marriage affects her welfare. The only thing affecting her welfare is people trying to tear apart something good before they even understand it. Is it good, Mr. Cole? A marriage built in 24 hours? Ethan stood up, signaling the interview was over. I've answered your questions. If you need anything else, talk to Marissa's lawyer. Rebecca rose slowly, gathering her things. I'll be in touch. After she left, Ethan slumped in his chair, exhausted, and it wasn't even 9 in the morning. His phone rang. Marissa. How bad was it? She asked without preamble. She's thorough. Asked about our timeline, my finances, whether I'm using you. What did you tell her? The truth. We're close enough to it. Marissa was quiet for a moment. Caleb's pushing the board to review the marriage before officially recognizing the trust clause. They're meeting Friday. That's 3 days away. I know. We need to be completely synchronized by then. Every detail, every story, every moment needs to match. Ethan rubbed his eyes. What do you suggest? Move in. Actually move in. Not just leave a few things around. Bring Sophie, bring your life, make it real. The request hit him like a punch to the gut. Marissa, I know what I'm asking. I know it's not fair, but if we're going to survive this, we can't keep playing at it. We have to live it. Sophie's already been through enough. Her mother, the move, watching me struggle. I can't uproot her again for something that might fall apart in a month. Then we make sure it doesn't fall apart. How? By lying better? By dragging her deeper into this? By giving her stability, Marissa said firmly. You said yourself you're 3 months from foreclosure. If this works, if we make it through Friday, you get the contracts. Your workshop survives. Sophie keeps her home, her school, her life. Isn't that worth 3 days of pretending? Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to find the flaw in her logic, but exhaustion and desperation made her words sound almost reasonable. I need to think about it, he said. We don't have time for thinking. The board meets in 72 hours. Then I'll give you an answer in 24. Marissa sighed. Okay. But Ethan, whatever you decide, I'll understand. I won't hold it against you if you walk away. I'm not walking away. Then what are you doing? Trying to figure out how to protect my daughter while keeping my promise to you. If you find the answer, let me know. I've been looking for it myself. After they hung up, Ethan sat in the silence of his workshop, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects, and tried to remember when his life had gotten so complicated. 2 weeks ago, his biggest problem was a supplier who kept delivering the wrong lumber. Now, he was married to a stranger, under investigation for fraud, and considering moving his daughter into a mansion to sell a lie. The morning crawled by. He tried to work, measuring, cutting, sanding, but his mind kept drifting. Around noon, his lawyer called. Not Marissa's lawyer. His own, a guy named Tom who handled small business contracts and the occasional dispute. Ethan, I just got a very interesting call, Tom said, voice tight with concern. Someone claiming to represent Marissa Vaughn's interests wanted to know about your financial situation. They were asking about debts, liens, any legal issues I might be aware of. What did you tell them? Nothing. Attorney-client privilege. But Ethan, what the hell is going on? Are you in trouble? No. Maybe. I don't know. That's not reassuring. Ethan explained the situation, the condensed version, the one that made him sound slightly less insane. Tom listened without interrupting, which was never a good sign. Jesus, Ethan, Tom said when he finished. Do you have any idea how bad this could get if it goes south? I have some idea, yeah. They could come after you for fraud, conspiracy. You could lose your business, your custody of Sophie. I know. Then why are you doing this? Because I don't have another choice. There's always another choice. Not when the bank's threatening foreclosure and your kid needs stability. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Okay. If you're committed to this, we need to document everything. Every conversation with Marissa, every agreement, every dollar that changes hands. If this blows up, we need to show you acted in good faith. Can you help with that? I can try. But Ethan? Be careful. People like Marissa Vaughn don't usually need guys like us unless they're desperate. And desperate people make desperate choices. After hanging up, Ethan stared at his phone, Tom's warning echoing in his head. But beneath the warning was a harder truth. Ethan was desperate too. Maybe that's why this made sense to him when it shouldn't. Two desperate people, each with everything to lose, gambling that together they could hold on a little longer. He picked up Sophie from school at 3, and she chattered the whole drive home about her day, art class, recess, the boy who ate paste and had to go to the nurse. Normal kid stuff, safe stuff. Hey, sweetheart, Ethan said as they pulled into the driveway. How would you feel about staying somewhere different for a few days? Sophie's face scrunched up. Like a hotel? No, like a friend's house, a really big house. Whose house? Marissa's. The lady you met yesterday. Sophie considered this. The pretty one with wet hair? Yeah. Why would we stay there? Ethan chose his words carefully. Because I'm helping her with some work, and it would be easier if we were close by. Just for a little while. Will there be other kids? No, just us. Can I bring Mr. Elephant? Relief washed through him. If she was worried about her stuffed animal, she wasn't worried about the bigger picture. Of course. Okay then. Just like that. Kids were resilient that way, adaptable in ways adults forgot how to be. That night, Ethan packed 2 duffel bags, one for him, one for Sophie. Clothes, toiletries, the essentials. He stood in Sophie's room, looking at the drawings on her wall, the books on her shelf, the small life they'd built in this house, and wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his life. His phone buzzed. Marissa. The investigator's report came back. Nothing conclusive, but Caleb's still pushing. We need to be ironclad Friday. Ethan texted back, We're coming tomorrow, Sophie and me. We'll stay through the weekend. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway, thank you. Don't thank me yet. He finished packing, made Sophie dinner, and tried not to think about all the ways this could destroy them both. The next morning, they loaded the truck and drove to Marissa's mansion. Sophie pressed her face against the window as they pulled through the gates, eyes wide. Daddy, this place is huge. Yeah, it is. Does Marissa live here all by herself? She does. That's sad. Out of the mouths of babes. Marissa met them at the door, dressed more casually than Ethan had ever seen her. Jeans, a simple sweater, hair pulled back. She looked younger, less like the corporate warrior, and more like someone who might actually live in a house this size. Hi, Sophie, she said, crouching down to the girl's level. Welcome. Sophie clutched Mr. Elephant tighter. Your house is really big. It is. Would you like to see your room? I get my own room? Of course. Marissa led them upstairs and Ethan followed, carrying both bags. She'd prepared a guest room at the end of the hall, freshly made bed, empty dresser, a window that overlooked the garden. It was 3 times the size of Sophie's room at home. This is mine? Sophie breathed. While you're here, yes, Marissa said. Sophie set Mr. Elephant on the bed, already exploring, and Marissa caught Ethan's eye. They stepped into the hallway. Thank you, she said quietly. I know this isn't easy. Where's my room? Marissa's expression shifted, uncertain, almost vulnerable. If we're married, we should probably share a room, Ethan finished. Yes. The reality of it hit him like cold water. Sleeping in the same house was one thing. Sleeping in the same room was something else entirely. There's a couch, Marissa added quickly. It's comfortable. I've fallen asleep on it plenty of times, or I can take it, and you can have the bed. We'll figure it out, Ethan said, cutting off her rambling. Let's just get through today first. They managed to establish a rhythm over the next few hours. Sophie explored the house like it was a castle, finding hidden corners and big windows, asking questions about everything. Marissa answered patiently, and Ethan noticed how she seemed to relax around his daughter, like Sophie's presence gave her permission to be something other than the iron-willed executive. Dinner was strange. They sat at a table meant for 12, just the three of them, eating pasta that Marissa had ordered from some expensive Italian place. Sophie chatted about school, completely oblivious to the tension humming beneath the surface. Do you have any games? Sophie asked Marissa between bites. Games? Like board games or cards. Marissa looked genuinely lost. I'm not sure. We could play Go Fish, Sophie suggested. Daddy taught me. I don't think I remember how. It's easy. I'll teach you. And somehow, an hour later, Ethan found himself sitting on the floor of Marissa's pristine living room, watching his daughter teach a multimillionaire how to play Go Fish. Marissa was terrible at it, couldn't keep a poker face to save her life, and Sophie kept winning, which made her giggle uncontrollably. You're supposed to trick me, Sophie explained seriously, not tell me what you have. I'm not good at tricking people, Marissa admitted. Ethan almost laughed at the irony, but Sophie just nodded sagely. That's okay. Daddy's bad at it too. When Sophie finally crashed around 8:30, Ethan carried her to the guest room and tucked her in. She was asleep before he finished the third forehead kiss. Downstairs, Marissa was cleaning up the cards, and Ethan found her standing in the middle of the living room, looking lost. She's a good kid, Marissa said softly. Yeah, she is. I haven't played a game like that since I was her age. Maybe younger. You did good. You? Marissa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I kept thinking about what happens when this ends, when we go back to our separate lives. She's going to remember this, remember me, and I'll just be someone who disappeared. Kids are tougher than you think. Are they? Or do we just tell ourselves that to feel better about the choices we make? Ethan didn't have an answer. They stood in silence, two people playing house in a mansion that felt more like a museum. I should probably show you the bedroom, Marissa said finally. They climbed the stairs together and Marissa led him to the master suite. It was exactly what he expected. Enormous bed, walk-in closet, bathroom bigger than his entire living room. Impersonal, cold. I meant what I said about the couch, Marissa offered. I'll take it. We're both adults. We can share a bed without it being weird. Are you sure? No. Yeah. They got ready for bed in awkward silence, taking turns in the bathroom, moving around each other carefully, both hyper-aware of the intimacy this implied. When they finally settled under the covers, staying on opposite sides of the massive mattress, Ethan stared at the ceiling and wondered if he'd ever feel normal again. Ethan? Marissa's voice came out of the darkness. Yeah? What did you tell Sophie about us? That I'm helping you with work, that we're staying here for a few days. Does she believe you? She's 7. She believes what I tell her. Lucky. Why? Because I stopped believing people a long time ago. Ethan turned his head, could barely make out her profile in the dim light filtering through the curtains. What happened to you? What do you mean? To make you like this. To make you unable to trust anyone. Marissa was quiet for so long, he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. My father built his company from nothing, worked himself to death doing it, literally. Heart attack at 59, right there at his desk. I found him. She paused. I was 22, just finished business school. Caleb was already circling, telling the board I was too young, too inexperienced, telling them my father would have wanted him in charge. But the trust said otherwise. The trust said I inherited everything when I turned 30 or got married. Whichever came first, my father thought he was protecting me, giving me time to grow up, find someone to build a life with. He didn't realize he was handing Caleb a roadmap for how to control me. And you never married. I never trusted anyone enough. Every guy I dated, I kept wondering if they wanted me or the company. After a while, it was easier to just not try. Ethan processed this, understanding clicking into place. So when you showed up at my door, you were the first person I'd met in years who didn't want anything from me. You didn't even know who I was. I knew. You knew my name, not me. I still don't. No, Marissa agreed, but you're here anyway. So are you. They lay there in the darkness, two strangers in a bed sharing truths they'd probably regret in the morning. Ethan felt sleep pulling at him, exhaustion finally winning out over anxiety. Ethan? Marissa said again, quieter this time. I'm sorry for dragging you into this, for risking your daughter's stability, for all of it. You didn't drag me. I made a choice. A choice you wouldn't have had to make if I hadn't been desperate. We're all desperate, Ethan said. Some of us are just better at hiding it. The next 2 days passed in a strange blur of domesticity and deception. They established routines, breakfast together, Ethan dropping Sophie at school, coming back to work in Marissa's home office on actual renovation plans for her properties, picking Sophie up, dinner as a family. It almost felt real. That was the dangerous part. Friday morning arrived with the weight of judgment. The board meeting was at 2. Marissa dressed in full armor, sharp suit, perfect makeup, hairstyled like she was going to war. Because she was. You don't have to come, she told Ethan as she checked her appearance in the mirror for the 3rd time. Yes, I do. They'll ask you questions, hard questions. I know. They'll try to embarrass you, make you feel small. Won't be the first time. Marissa turned to face him. Why are you really doing this? I told you, not the money, not the contracts, the real reason. Ethan thought about it, really thought about it. Because you reminded me what it feels like to fight for something. I've been so focused on just surviving that I forgot what it's like to actually want something. You want that company. You've earned it. And I'm not going to let some entitled asshole take it from you. Something shifted in Marissa's expression. Surprise, gratitude, something deeper he couldn't name. Thank you, she said. Save it for after the meeting. They drove to the office in silence, and when they walked into the boardroom together, every head turned. Caleb sat at the far end of the table, looking supremely confident. The other board members, 7 of them, all men old enough to be Marissa's father, watched with undisguised curiosity. Marissa, the chairman said, and Mr. Cole, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me, Ethan replied, taking the seat beside Marissa. Caleb leaned back in his chair, smiling. I have to say, this has been quite the whirlwind. Marriage, moving in together, all in less than a week. Congratulations. Thank you, Marissa said coolly. Although, Caleb continued, it does raise some questions about the validity of this arrangement. What kind of questions? The chairman asked. Caleb pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. The investigator's report. It shows that Mr. Cole and my sister had minimal contact before their sudden engagement. No witnesses to their relationship, no public appearances, nothing to suggest this was anything other than a business transaction. One of the board members picked up the report, flipped through it. Is this true? We kept our relationship private, Marissa said. Given my position and Mr. Cole's preference for privacy, we thought it was best. Private is one thing, invisible is another. Ethan felt the room closing in, felt the judgment pressing down. This was it, the moment they'd been preparing for. He stood up, every eye turned to him. Marissa's hand found his under the table, squeezed once. Whether in support or warning, he couldn't tell. I'm going to save us all some time, Ethan said. Yes, Marissa and I got married quickly. Yes, I'm in debt. Yes, she's offering me work. None of that changes the fact that this marriage is legal and binding. Legal doesn't mean legitimate, Caleb interjected. You're right, Ethan said, turning to face him. But let me ask you something. What makes a marriage legitimate? Is it time? Because I know couples who dated for years and still divorced. Is it public displays? Because I know people who perform for cameras and hate each other behind closed doors. He looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. I married Marissa because she's brilliant, driven, and stronger than anyone in this room. I married her because when I talk to her, I don't feel like I'm drowning for the first time in 3 years. I married her because my daughter lights up when she's around. Are those good enough reasons for you? The room was silent. Even Caleb seemed momentarily at a loss. The contracts Marissa offered me, Ethan continued, they're at market rate, documented, legal. If I wanted to use her, I could have asked for a lot more. But that's not what this is about. He turned back to Marissa, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but no less firm. This is about two people trying to build something that matters in a world that keeps trying to tear them down. So yeah, we rushed it. Yeah, it's messy, but it's real. And if you can't see that, then you're the ones who need to have your judgment questioned. Ethan sat down, his heart pounding. Marissa's hand was still in his, trembling slightly. The chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Vaughn, unless you have actual evidence of fraud, not speculation, not suspicion, I believe we need to recognize this marriage as legitimate under the terms of the trust. Caleb's face went red. You can't be serious. The trust is clear. Marissa inherits full control upon marriage. That condition has been met. This is a farce. This is the law, the chairman said firmly. All in favor of recognizing Marissa Vaughn Cole's inheritance? 6 hands went up. Only Caleb abstained. Motion carries. Marissa, congratulations on your marriage and your full control of the company. Caleb stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. He looked at Marissa with pure venom. This isn't over, he said. Yes, Marissa replied calmly. It is. Caleb stormed out, and the other board members began filing out more slowly, some offering congratulations, others just nodding awkwardly. When they were alone, Marissa turned to Ethan. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yeah, I did. You made them believe you. I made myself believe me. Marissa studied his face, searching for something. Was any of it true? Ethan thought about lying, about keeping that wall between them. But after everything they'd been through, after everything he'd just said, the truth seemed easier. Most of it, he admitted. Which parts? Does it matter? Marissa's phone buzzed before she could answer, probably her lawyer, probably with details they'd need to handle. But she ignored it, kept her eyes on Ethan. It might, she said softly. They left the office together, drove back to the mansion in silence. When they arrived, Sophie was already home. Mrs. Chen had picked her up from school as arranged. She ran to greet them, excited about a project she'd made in art class. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Ethan and Marissa sat in the living room with glasses of wine they weren't really drinking. What happens now? Ethan asked. Now we wait and see if Caleb tries anything else. And if he doesn't, then we keep going. For a while, at least. Make it look real until the dust settles. How long is that? I don't know. A few months, maybe. A few months of this life, the mansion, the routines, the pretending that was starting to feel less like pretending. Ethan should have been relieved, should have been grateful for the reprieve. Instead, he just felt tired. I should get some sleep, he said, standing. Marissa nodded but didn't move. Ethan, what you said in the boardroom about not feeling like you're drowning, don't, he said gently. Don't read into it. We both said what we needed to say to win. Right, of course. But as Ethan climbed the stairs to the bedroom they shared, he knew they were both lying again. The question was which lies they could survive, and which ones would destroy them. The lies got easier after the board meeting, which should have worried Ethan more than it did. Within a week, he could navigate Marissa's mansion without thinking, knew which cabinet held the coffee mugs, which drawer had Sophie's crayons, where Marissa liked to work when she needed to think. The rhythms of their fabricated life settled into something that resembled normalcy, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. Sophie adapted faster than either of them expected. She claimed the guest room as her own, decorating it with drawings from school and arranging her stuffed animals on the windowsill in careful order. She started calling the mansion the big house, and their old place the small house, as if both could exist simultaneously in her world without contradiction. Ethan envied that ability. He was in the kitchen making breakfast on a Tuesday morning when Marissa came downstairs already dressed for work, phone pressed to her ear, her expression tense. "I don't care what his lawyer says," she was telling someone, probably her own attorney. "The trust is settled. He doesn't have grounds for appeal." A pause. "Then let him try. We'll be ready." She ended the call and rubbed her temples, exhaustion written in every line of her posture. "Caleb?" Ethan asked, sliding a mug of coffee across the counter toward her. "He's filing for a forensic audit of the company. Claims there might be financial irregularities that could invalidate the board's decision." "Can he do that?" "He can try. It'll tie things up for months, cost a fortune in legal fees, and generally make everyone's life miserable." She took a sip of coffee, grimaced. "Which is exactly what he wants." Ethan added sugar to her cup without asking. 2 spoons, no cream. Marissa noticed, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe gratitude, maybe something more complicated. "You don't have to memorize my habits," she said quietly. "Too late." Sophie bounded into the kitchen, still in her pajamas, hair sticking up in every direction. "Morning, Daddy." "Morning, Marissa." The casualness with which she included Marissa in that greeting made Ethan's chest tighten. This was what worried him most. Not the investigators or Caleb's machinations, but the way his daughter was weaving Marissa into the fabric of their daily life, creating connections that would hurt when they inevitably broke. "Morning, sweetheart," Ethan said, setting a plate of scrambled eggs in front of her. "You've got 20 minutes before we need to leave for school." Sophie shoveled eggs into her mouth with single-minded focus, then looked at Marissa with the blunt curiosity only children possessed. "Are you and Daddy married for real or just pretend?" The question landed like a grenade. Marissa's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Ethan felt his heart stop. They'd been so careful, so deliberate about maintaining the fiction, but kids saw things adults missed. Kids asked questions adults knew better than to voice. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" Ethan managed, keeping his voice carefully neutral. Sophie shrugged. "Tommy at school said his mom thinks you're lying, that people don't get married that fast unless they're pretending." Marissa set down her cup slowly, deliberately. "What do you think?" "I think grown-ups are confusing," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "But Daddy doesn't lie to me, so if he says you're married, then you're married." The simple faith in that statement cut deeper than any accusation could have. Ethan wanted to tell her the truth, wanted to prepare her for the inevitable moment when this house of cards collapsed. But looking at her hopeful face, he couldn't bring himself to shatter that trust. "We are married," Marissa said, and her voice didn't waver. "The adults who are saying otherwise don't know what they're talking about." Sophie nodded, satisfied, and went back to her eggs. Crisis averted, at least for now. After Ethan dropped Sophie at school, he drove to his workshop intending to finally tackle the backlog of work that had been piling up. Instead, he found Rebecca Torres waiting by the door again, this time with a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Caleb's attorney. "Mr. Cole," the attorney said, extending a hand Ethan didn't shake. "I'm Marcus Fleming. I represent Caleb Vaughn's interests in this matter." "What matter would that be?" "The matter of your fraudulent marriage to his sister." Ethan unlocked the workshop door and walked inside, forcing them to follow. "Marriage is legal and documented, nothing fraudulent about it." "Legal and fraudulent aren't mutually exclusive," Fleming said smoothly. "We have reason to believe this marriage was contracted solely to circumvent the trust's intentions." "Believe whatever you want. Doesn't make it true." Rebecca pulled out her tablet, swiped to pull up what looked like financial records. "Your mortgage was 3 months delinquent before this marriage. Now it's current. Your business accounts showed a negative balance. Now they're solvent. Convenient timing. Marissa hired my company for legitimate work. I got paid. I paid my bills. That's how business works." "At market rate," Fleming said, "which for your services amounts to approximately 3 times what you were earning before." "Maybe I was undercharging. Or maybe you saw an opportunity and took it." Ethan set down the blueprints he'd been holding and met Fleming's eyes directly. "You know what I see? A man trying to justify his client's jealousy by making my financial situation into a crime. I married Marissa because I wanted to. She hired me because she trusts my work. Everything else is just you trying to find dirt where there isn't any." Fleming smiled, the expression cold. We'll see about that. We've subpoenaed your financial records, your business contracts, your correspondence with Ms. Vaughn. If there's anything to find, we'll find it. Then you'll find exactly what I told you. Legal contracts, market rate payments, and a marriage that's nobody's business but ours. After they left, Ethan called Marissa. They're coming at this from the money angle, he told her. Trying to prove I married you for financial gain. I know, my lawyer just called. They're subpoenaing everything, bank records, emails, text messages. Will they find anything? Nothing incriminating, but they'll twist whatever they can. Ethan leaned against his workbench, feeling the weight of it all pressing down. Maybe we should just end this, cut our losses before it gets worse. Is that what you want? The question was simple, but the answer wasn't. Ending it meant losing the contracts, probably losing his workshop, definitely losing the strange stability they'd built. But continuing meant dragging Sophie deeper into the deception, meant more investigations, more lawyers, more chances for everything to explode. I don't know what I want anymore, Ethan admitted. Marissa was quiet for a moment. There's a foundation gala this Saturday. Annual fundraiser, black tie, all the board members will be there. We should go together. Why? Because married couples attend these things. Because we need to show a united front. Because if we're going to do this, we need to really do it. A gala. I know it's not your scene. I don't own a tux. We'll get you one. Ethan closed his eyes, imagined himself in that world. Crystal champagne flutes and seven-figure donations, and people who saw him as nothing more than Marissa's questionable life choice. This is getting out of hand. I know, but we're already in it. Might as well see it through. That night, Marissa took Ethan to a tailor in downtown, the kind of place where they didn't list prices because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. The tailor was a small Italian man named Giorgio who took one look at Ethan and started pulling suits like he could see through to some better version of him. You have good shoulders, Giorgio announced. Strong build. We can work with this. Ethan stood stiffly while Giorgio measured, pinned, adjusted. In the mirror, he barely recognized himself. The rough edges temporarily smoothed away, the calluses on his hands the only evidence of who he really was. Marissa sat in a velvet chair nearby, watching with an expression he couldn't quite read. You clean up well, she said when Giorgio stepped away to get another jacket. I feel like a fraud. You look like you belong. Those aren't the same thing. She tilted her head, studying him. No, they're not. But sometimes you have to look like you belong before you can feel like you belong. Is that what you did? When you took over the company? Every single day for the first 5 years. Marissa's voice went soft, distant. I'd put on the suit, the heels, the confidence, and pray nobody noticed I was terrified. And now? Now the suit fits better. The fear's still there, just quieter. Giorgio returned with a midnight blue tuxedo that probably cost more than Ethan's truck. He tried it on, and even he had to admit it looked good, transforming him from contractor to someone who might actually belong at Marissa's side. We'll take it, Marissa told Giorgio before Ethan could check the price tag. Marissa, don't argue. You need it for Saturday. I can't let you... You already did. Besides, consider it part of the performance. The performance. Right, that's what this was. Ethan kept forgetting. They picked up Sophie from Mrs. Chen's on the way home. She'd been having dinner there more often lately, giving Ethan and Marissa space to handle the escalating situation with Caleb. Mrs. Chen never asked questions, but her concerned looks said plenty. Sophie fell asleep in the car, head lolling against the window. Ethan carried her inside, tucked her into bed in the guest room that was starting to feel like her real room. When he came back downstairs, Marissa was in the kitchen opening a bottle of wine. Want some? She asked. Yeah. They sat at the counter, glasses between them, the house quiet except for the subtle hum of expensive appliances. How long can we keep this up? Ethan asked. The marriage or the pretending? Is there a difference? Marissa swirled her wine, watching the liquid catch the light. I used to think so. Now I'm not sure. That's not an answer. No, it's not. She took a sip, set the glass down carefully. My lawyer says we need to stay married for at least 6 months to make it look legitimate. Anything less, and Caleb could argue we never intended it to be permanent. 6 months? At minimum. Ethan did the math. 6 months of this life, this lie, this strange intimacy that felt more real every day. 6 months of Sophie getting more attached, of routines becoming habits, of pretending becoming something dangerously close to truth. And then what? He asked. Then we reassess. See if Caleb's backed off. See if the board's satisfied. See if... She stopped, seemed to reconsider her words. See where we are. Where we are, Ethan echoed. You mean whether we still need each other? Something like that. The silence stretched between them, heavy with all the things they weren't saying. Ethan finished his wine, rinsed the glass, and headed upstairs. He paused at the bedroom door, looking back to find Marissa still sitting at the counter, staring at her own reflection in the dark window. You coming to bed? He asked. In a bit. But when Ethan woke at 3 a.m, her side of the bed was still cold, still untouched. He found her in her home office, surrounded by paperwork, eyes red from staring at screens. Marissa. She looked up, startled, like she'd forgotten anyone else existed in the house. Did I wake you? No. What are you doing? Preparing. Caleb's audit starts Monday. I need to make sure every transaction is documented, every decision justified. It's 3 a.m. I know what time it is. Ethan walked over, gently closed her laptop. You need sleep. I need to protect my company. You need both. Marissa's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her. I can't lose this, Ethan. It's all I have. That's not true. Isn't it? The company is my entire life, my father's legacy. If Caleb takes it, he won't. You don't know that. Neither do you. But killing yourself over hypotheticals won't change anything. He held out his hand, waited. After a long moment, Marissa took it and let him pull her to her feet. They walked upstairs together, and this time when they got into bed, she didn't stay on her far edge of the mattress. She settled closer to the center, close enough that Ethan could feel her warmth, hear her breathing gradually slow as exhaustion finally claimed her. He lay awake longer, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember when this had stopped feeling like a transaction and started feeling like something he couldn't quite name. Saturday arrived with the weight of performance. Ethan spent the afternoon helping Sophie with a school project while Marissa disappeared into her closet, emerging hours later in a black gown that turned her into someone from a different world entirely. Her hair was swept up, diamonds at her throat and ears, borrowed, she'd mentioned offhandedly, from the family collection. You look beautiful, Ethan said, and meant it. You look nervous, she replied. I am nervous. Don't be. Just stay close, smile when appropriate, and let me handle the talking. What if someone asks about us? Then we tell them the truth. That we're married, we're happy, and it's none of their damn business. Sophie appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. Marissa, you look like a princess. Marissa's expression softened in the way it only did around Sophie. Thank you, sweetie. You be good for Mrs. Chen tonight, okay? I will. Are you and Daddy going dancing? Probably. Will you take pictures? If we can. After they dropped Sophie at Mrs. Chen's, the drive to the gala venue felt like traveling to an execution. Ethan's hands were sweating in his new tuxedo, his collar too tight despite Giorgio's expert tailoring. Breathe, Marissa said beside him. I am breathing. You're panicking. Little bit, yeah. She reached over, squeezed his hand. These people aren't better than you. They're just richer and more practiced at pretending otherwise. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to remind you that everyone's performing. You're just newer at it. The venue was a museum that had been transformed into something out of a fantasy. Ice sculptures, champagne fountains, string quartet playing in the corner. People in designer clothes milled about, air kissing and making small talk that probably concealed sharks circling beneath the surface. Ethan felt every eye turn when they walked in together. There she is, someone murmured, with the contractor. Ignore them, Marissa whispered, her hand firm on his arm. They made it approximately 10 feet before the chairman of the board intercepted them, drink in hand and smile plastered on his face. Marissa, Ethan, so glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it, Marissa said smoothly. How's married life treating you? Wonderfully. The chairman's gaze shifted to Ethan with barely concealed assessment. And you, mister? Cole adjusting to this world? Still figuring out which fork to use, Ethan said, and was gratified when the chairman laughed. At least you're honest about it. Refreshing, actually. They circulated through the room, Marissa introducing Ethan to board members, investors, people whose names he forgot immediately. Everyone asked the same questions with varying degrees of subtlety. How did you meet? When did you know? Isn't this all rather sudden? Ethan answered with the practiced lies they'd rehearsed, but somewhere around the 10th repetition, the words started tasting different in his mouth. Less like fiction, more like alternate history. Then Caleb appeared. He materialized out of the crowd like a storm cloud, perfectly tailored suit and predatory smile firmly in place. Sister, he said, the word dripping with false affection, and dear brother-in-law, what a lovely couple you make. Caleb, Marissa replied, her voice ice. Enjoying the party? Immensely. Although I have to say, seeing you here with... He gestured vaguely at Ethan. Your charity case is certainly the entertainment of the evening. Ethan felt Marissa stiffen beside him, felt his own anger rising, but before he could respond, Marissa beat him to it. Careful, Caleb. Your jealousy is showing. Jealousy? Of what, exactly? Of the fact that I found someone who actually cares about me, not just what I can give them. Caleb's smile sharpened. How touching. I'm sure Mr. Cole's newfound financial stability has nothing to do with that care. At least I chose someone, Marissa shot back, rather than someone choosing me for what I could do for them. It was a direct hit. Caleb's expression went cold, dangerous. Enjoy it while it lasts, he said quietly, because when this charade falls apart, and it will, you'll have nothing left. No company, no dignity, no... Dance with me, Ethan said suddenly, cutting Caleb off mid-threat. Marissa blinked. What? Dance with me, Ethan repeated, extending his hand. That's what married couples do at these things, right? For a moment she just stared at him. Then she took his hand, let him lead her away from Caleb, and onto the dance floor where other couples swayed to the string quartet's rendition of something classical and melancholy. Ethan had no idea what he was doing. He'd learned basic steps for his own wedding a lifetime ago, but muscle memory only went so far. Marissa guided him gently, her hand on his shoulder, his on her waist, moving together in a rhythm that felt more intimate than anything they'd shared yet. Thank you, she whispered, for getting me away from him. He's trying to get under your skin. It's working. Don't let it. They turned slowly, and Ethan became aware of people watching, phones probably recording, gossip already spreading. This moment would be dissected, analyzed, used as evidence one way or another. He didn't care. Marissa leaned closer, her head nearly resting against his shoulder, and for the span of the song, they weren't performing. They were just two people holding on to each other in a room full of strangers, finding something solid in the chaos. When the song ended, Ethan didn't immediately let go. Neither did Marissa. They stood there suspended in the moment until someone cleared their throat nearby and the spell broke. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of champagne and small talk and carefully maintained smiles. By the time they made it back to the car, Ethan's face hurt from the effort. You did good, Marissa said as they drove home. I felt like a performing monkey. Welcome to my world. They picked up Sophie from Mrs. Chen's. She was already asleep, clutching a blanket, and carried her inside. Ethan tucked her into bed while Marissa changed out of her gown and back into something human. When he came back downstairs, she was in the kitchen again, this time just staring at her phone with an unreadable expression. What is it? Ethan asked. She turned the phone to show him. Social media was already buzzing with photos from the gala, most of them featuring Ethan and Marissa dancing, looking for all the world like a couple actually in love. They bought it, Marissa said softly. Isn't that what we wanted? Yes. No, I don't know anymore. Ethan took the phone from her, set it aside. What's really bothering you? Marissa wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking smaller despite still wearing heels. When we were dancing, when you were holding me, I forgot we were pretending. Just for a moment, I forgot this isn't real. Marissa, and that scares me. Because when this ends, when we go back to our separate lives, I'm going to remember what it felt like. To have someone choose to stand beside me, to have someone look at me like you did tonight. How did I look at you? Like I mattered. The words hung between them, raw and honest. Ethan knew he should back away, should remind them both that this was temporary, that feelings were dangerous territory they'd agreed not to enter. Instead, he closed the distance between them. You do matter, he said quietly. Don't say things like that unless you mean them. I mean them. Marissa looked up at him, vulnerability written across her face in a way he'd never seen before. This is a bad idea. Probably. We agreed to keep this professional. We did. So why does it feel like we're failing? Ethan didn't have an answer. He just stood there, close enough to touch, far enough to still pretend they had boundaries. Then Marissa's phone rang, shattering the moment. She answered it, listened for 30 seconds, and went pale. What? Ethan asked when she hung up. That was my lawyer. Someone leaked the investigator's report to the press. Tomorrow morning, every news outlet is going to run a story questioning the legitimacy of our marriage. Can they do that? Apparently they already did. Ethan's mind raced. What does this mean? It means Caleb's changing tactics. He can't prove fraud legally, so he's trying us in the court of public opinion. If he can make us look illegitimate enough, the board might cave to pressure and reopen the trust question. Even though they already voted? Public scandal makes people reconsider their positions, especially people worried about their reputations. Ethan ran his hands through his hair, felt the careful composure he'd maintained all evening finally cracking. This is never going to end, is it? We could do everything right, and Caleb will just keep finding new ways to attack. Probably. So what do we do? Marissa looked at him, and in her eyes, Ethan saw the same exhaustion he felt. We fight, because that's all we know how to do. The story broke at 6 a.m. By 7, Ethan's phone was blowing up with calls from numbers he didn't recognize. Reporters, probably, looking for quotes. He ignored them all, focused on making breakfast for Sophie before she saw any of it. Too late. Daddy? Sophie appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, holding Marissa's tablet. Why is there a picture of you and Marissa on the news? Ethan's heart sank. Where did you get that? It was on the table. The screen lit up and I saw it. He took the tablet gently. The headline screamed, Vaughn Heiress's suspicious marriage, love or loophole. Marissa came downstairs, took one look at Sophie's confused face and Ethan's guilty one, and understood immediately. Sophie, sweetheart, she said, kneeling down to the girl's level. Sometimes people write stories that aren't true. They don't know us, so they make guesses. But why would they guess mean things? Because mean stories get more attention than nice ones. Sophie processed this with the serious concentration she brought to difficult math problems. Are you and Daddy going to be okay? The question was so direct, so earnest, that Marissa had to look away to compose herself. Yes, she said finally. We're going to be okay. Promise? I promise. It was the easiest lie and the hardest truth Marissa had ever told. After dropping Sophie at school with extra reassurances and an extra tight hug, Ethan and Marissa returned home to find a news van parked outside the gates. They can't get in, Marissa said. Security won't let them, but they'll wait there all day if they think we'll come out. So we're trapped, effectively. They spent the day in the house, curtains drawn, phones silenced. Marissa worked from her office, handling the crisis with her PR team. Ethan tried to focus on blueprints, but mostly just paced, feeling useless. Around 3, Marissa emerged from her office looking defeated. Caleb gave an interview, she said. He's claiming I coerced you into marriage, that he's concerned for your welfare and Sophie's. He's positioning himself as the worried family member just trying to protect everyone. That's bullshit. It's effective bullshit. Public sentiment is shifting. People are wondering if maybe he has a point. Ethan's anger flared hot. So we what? Just let him control the narrative? What else can we do? We tell the truth. Which truth? That we got married to save my company? That's exactly what he wants us to admit. No. The truth that whatever this started as, it's become something real. That we're not perfect, but we're trying. That Caleb doesn't get to decide what our marriage means. Marissa stared at him. You want to go public. I want to stop hiding. Oh, Ethan, if we do that, if we put ourselves out there, they'll tear us apart looking for inconsistencies. Let them look. We've got nothing left to hide. Don't we? The question was weighted with everything they'd been avoiding, all the feelings neither of them wanted to acknowledge. I don't know, Ethan admitted, but I'm tired of running from this, from Caleb, from the truth, from whatever this is between us. Marissa's phone rang before she could respond. She glanced at it, frowned. It's the chairman. I should take this. She disappeared back into her office. Ethan waited, dread building with each passing minute. When she finally emerged, her face was carefully blank. The board wants to meet tomorrow, she said. Emergency session. They want to discuss whether the negative publicity warrants reconsidering their decision. They can't do that, they already voted. They can do whatever they want if enough of them agree, and Caleb's been working them, playing on their fears about the company's reputation. So we go, we face them. And say what? Ethan moved closer, took her hands in his. We tell them the truth, all of it. How we started, why we stayed, what this has become. We stop trying to control the story and just let it be what it is. That's terrifying. Yeah, but it's also honest. Marissa looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. When did you get so brave? About the same time you got scared. Figured one of us should balance the scales. She almost smiled. Almost. Then her expression crumbled, and before Ethan could react, she was kissing him. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate, honest. The kind of kiss that came from weeks of denial and careful distance finally breaking apart. Ethan responded without thinking, pulling her closer, forgetting every reason why this was a bad idea. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marissa whispered, That was a mistake, Ethan offered. I was going to say inevitable. That too. They stood there in the fading afternoon light, the truth of what they'd become finally impossible to ignore. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever Caleb did or the board decided, this moment was real. And terrifying as that was, it was also the first honest thing they'd done since this whole mess started. They didn't talk about the kiss. Not that night, not the next morning over coffee, while Sophie chattered about a science project. The silence around it felt louder than any conversation could have been, a presence in the room neither of them acknowledged but both constantly felt. Ethan focused on scrambling eggs, on checking Sophie's backpack, on anything that didn't require him to meet Marissa's eyes and confront what had shifted between them. She did the same, burying herself in her phone, responding to emails with sharp efficiency that didn't quite mask the tension in her shoulders. You're both being weird, Sophie announced, looking between them with the uncanny perception of children who noticed everything adults tried to hide. We're just tired, sweetheart, Ethan said too quickly. And stressed about a work thing, Marissa added. Sophie looked unconvinced but mercifully dropped it, returning her attention to her cereal. After Ethan dropped her at school, he drove back to the mansion in silence, gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary, trying to organize the chaos in his head. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock. 4 hours to prepare for a conversation that could dismantle everything. 4 hours to figure out how to explain a marriage that had started as strategy and become something neither of them knew how to define. Marissa was waiting when he got back, dressed in what Ethan had come to recognize as her armor, a charcoal suit that made her look untouchable, hair pulled back severely, makeup perfect. Only the slight tremor in her hands as she adjusted her earrings betrayed her nerves. We should talk about what we're going to say, she said, not quite looking at him. Agreed. They sat in her office, the space between them on the leather couch deliberately maintained, and tried to script truth that wouldn't destroy them. The board wants to know if this marriage is legitimate, Marissa started, her lawyer voice firmly in place. They'll ask about our relationship timeline, our intentions, whether we plan to stay married. And we tell them what? The facts. We met 6 months ago professionally. The relationship developed. We married quickly due to the trust deadline, but with genuine feelings. Genuine feelings, Ethan repeated. That's one way to put it. Marissa finally looked at him directly, her expression guarded. What would you call it? The question hung between them, weighted with everything they'd been avoiding. Ethan could give her the easy answer, the safe one that kept things professional and maintained their careful distance. Or he could tell her the truth that had been building since that first desperate night when she'd shown up at his door. Complicated, he said finally. Real. Terrifying. All of the above, Marissa agreed softly. Before Ethan could respond, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Mr. Cole? A woman's voice, professional but with an edge of concern. This is Principal Martinez from Sophie's school. There's been an incident. Ethan's blood went cold. What kind of incident? Is she hurt? She's fine physically, but there was an altercation with another student. Some of the children saw the news coverage about your marriage, and things got heated. Sophie's in my office. I think you should come get her. I'm on my way. He hung up, already moving toward the door. Marissa was right behind him. What happened? Sophie got in a fight at school. About us. About the news coverage. Marissa's face went pale. I'm coming with you. They made it to the school in 12 minutes, breaking several traffic laws. Principal Martinez met them in the main office, her expression professionally sympathetic in a way that made Ethan's stomach twist. Sophie's in the counselor's office, she said. She's okay, but she's upset. Another student said some unkind things about your family situation, and Sophie defended you both, physically. Sophie hit someone? Ethan couldn't quite process it. His daughter, who cried when they watched sad movies, who rescued spiders instead of killing them. The other child said your marriage was fake and that you were a liar. Sophie pushed her. No one was seriously hurt, but we have a zero-tolerance policy on physical altercations. They found Sophie sitting in a small office, eyes red from crying, a fierce expression on her face that reminded Ethan painfully of her mother. She looked up when they entered, and her lower lip trembled. I'm sorry, Daddy. But she was saying mean things, and Ethan pulled her into his arms, feeling her small body shake with sobs she'd been holding back. It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. It's not okay, Sophie said into his shoulder. She said you were lying about being married. She said Marissa doesn't really love us, and you're just pretending for money. And I know it's not true because I see how you look at each other and how Marissa makes you smile, and... She broke off, crying harder, and Ethan met Marissa's eyes over Sophie's head. The raw pain he saw there mirrored his own. Sophie, Marissa said gently, kneeling beside them. Can you look at me? Sophie lifted her head, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. What that girl said about us pretending. She doesn't know what she's talking about, Marissa continued. People say hurtful things when they don't understand, but you don't have to fight them. You don't have to defend us like that. But they were being mean about Daddy, about you. I know, and I know you were trying to protect us. That's very brave. But Sophie, sometimes the bravest thing is to not let mean words make you act in ways that hurt you. I just wanted them to stop, Sophie whispered. I know, sweetie, I know. Principal Martinez recommended Sophie take the rest of the day off, and Ethan agreed immediately. They walked to the car in silence, Sophie between them, holding both their hands in a grip that felt desperately tight. On the drive back, Sophie said quietly from the back seat, Daddy, are you and Marissa really married? Like, for real? Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. In the passenger seat, he felt Marissa tense. Yes, Ethan said, because it was the truth. The marriage certificate was real. The vows were legally binding. Everything else was just semantics. Do you love each other? The question was so direct, so innocent, that it physically hurt. Ethan looked at Marissa, silently asking permission, asking for guidance, asking for an answer he didn't have himself. Marissa turned in her seat to face Sophie. Love is complicated, Sophie. It's not always like in movies where people just know immediately. Sometimes it grows slowly, sometimes it surprises you. But do you? Sophie pressed, with the relentless logic of 7-year-olds who wouldn't accept non-answers. I care about your dad very much, Marissa said carefully. And about you. That's not the same thing. No, Marissa agreed. It's not. But sometimes caring is where love starts. Sophie seemed to accept this, settling back into her seat. But Ethan caught Marissa's expression in the side mirror, lost, uncertain. as shaken as he felt. When they got home, Sophie went straight to her room with Mr. Elephant, emotionally exhausted. Ethan and Marissa stood in the entryway, the silence heavy between them. "We have 90 minutes before the board meeting," Marissa said, checking her watch like it could give her something to hold on to. "We can't go. We have to go. If we don't show up, Sophie just got in a fight because of this. Because of the pressure we're putting on her with this charade." "It's not a charade," Marissa said sharply. "Not anymore. You said so yourself." "Then what is it?" "Because I don't have a word for whatever this is, and I can't keep dragging my daughter through it without knowing." Marissa's composure cracked. "You think I know? You think I have this figured out?" "I don't. I haven't figured anything out since you agreed to this insane plan. Every day I wake up more confused than the day before about what's real and what we're performing." "Then maybe we need to stop performing." "And do what? Tell the board the truth? That we started this as a business arrangement and somewhere along the way forgot where the lies ended and the truth began?" "Yes," Ethan said. "Exactly that. They'll crucify us. Caleb will win. I'll lose everything." "Maybe. Or maybe honesty is the only thing that'll save us." Marissa shook her head, pacing now. "You don't understand what you're asking. This company is all I have. It's my father's legacy, my entire identity. Without it, I'm nothing." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Take away the company, the money, the power. What's left? A woman who's so bad at being human that she had to buy a husband to meet a deadline." The self-loathing in her voice stopped Ethan cold. He crossed the space between them, caught her shoulders gently but firmly. "You want to know what's left?" he said. "A woman who plays Go Fish with a 7-year-old, even though she doesn't remember the rules. A woman who learned how Sophie likes her toast cut because she paid attention. A woman who stood in front of a board of men twice her age and fought for what she built. That's who you are without the company. That's who I see." Marissa's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You barely know me." "I know enough. You know what I've shown you. The rest is human," Ethan interrupted, "messy and scared and real. And I'll take that over perfect any day." She stared at him, breathing hard, and for a moment Ethan thought she might kiss him again. Instead, she stepped back, wiped her eyes carefully so as not to smudge her makeup, and straightened her jacket. "We should leave in 20 minutes, she said, her voice steady again. "I'll check on Sophie." She walked away before Ethan could respond, leaving him standing alone in the entryway of a house that still didn't feel like home, wondering when exactly he'd stopped being able to separate his feelings about the arrangement from his feelings about Marissa herself. The drive to the office was silent. Marissa stared out the window, fingers twisted together in her lap. Ethan kept replaying their conversation, Sophie's questions, the way everything was unraveling faster than he could patch it. The boardroom felt like walking into a courtroom. All 7 board members were already seated, Caleb at the far end wearing an expression of poorly concealed triumph. The chairman gestured to 2 empty seats. "Thank you for coming," he said, in a tone that suggested attendance wasn't optional. "Of course," Marissa replied, settling into her chair with practiced grace. Ethan sat beside her, hyper-aware of every eye on them, every judgment being formed. "I'll be direct," the chairman continued. "The publicity surrounding your marriage has become a concern. Several board members have expressed doubts about the circumstances, and Mr. Vaughn has raised questions about the legitimacy of the union." "Questions I've already answered," Marissa said coolly. "Multiple times." "Yes, but new information has come to light." Caleb leaned forward, sliding a folder across the table. "Financial records showing Mr. Cole's debts being cleared within days of your marriage. Testimony from his neighbors suggesting you two barely knew each other before the wedding. And now an incident at his daughter's school stemming from public speculation about the marriage." "You've been investigating my daughter's school?" Ethan's voice came out dangerous, controlled fury. "I've been doing my due diligence," Caleb said smoothly. "This board has a responsibility to ensure the company isn't being manipulated. The only manipulation here is yours," Marissa shot back. "Then explain the timeline. Explain why you rushed into marriage with a virtual stranger days before the trust clause activated." The room went silent. Every board member watched, waiting. This was the moment. The truth or another carefully crafted lie. Ethan felt Marissa tense beside him, saw her preparing the defense they'd scripted. Before she could speak, he did. Because she was desperate, Ethan said bluntly. And so was I. The room froze. Marissa turned to stare at him, eyes wide with something between panic and disbelief. Excuse me? The chairman said. Ethan leaned forward, meeting Caleb's eyes directly. You want the truth? Here it is. Marissa needed a husband to keep her company. I needed money to save my business and my home. We made a deal. Marriage in exchange for contracts. Legal, documented, mutually beneficial. Ethan, Marissa's voice was barely a whisper. But here's what you don't understand, Ethan continued, voice steady. What started as a transaction became something else. I got to know her, saw how hard she works, how much this company means, how she cares about people even when she pretends not to. My daughter adores her. He paused, the next words harder than any he'd spoken. I stopped being able to tell where the arrangement ended and my actual feelings began. The silence in the room was absolute. So, yes, we got married for practical reasons, Ethan said. Yes, the timing was strategic. Yes, I benefited financially. But that doesn't make what we've built fake. It just makes it complicated. And last I checked, complicated didn't violate any trust clauses. One of the board members cleared his throat. Mr. Cole, are you saying this marriage is real despite its unconventional beginning? I'm saying it's real because of its unconventional beginning. We didn't have the luxury of pretending things would be perfect. We had to build something honest from the ground up. Caleb laughed, sharp and bitter. This is ridiculous. He's admitting to exactly what I accused them of. He's admitting to being human, the chairman interrupted, to making difficult choices in difficult circumstances. That's not fraud, Caleb. That's life. You can't be serious. They just confessed. They confessed to entering a marriage for practical reasons that developed into genuine partnership, another board member said. Show me a marriage in this room that didn't have some practical component. Business alliances, family expectations, financial security. Marriage has never been purely about romance. This is different. Only in its honesty, the chairman said firmly. Mr. Cole just gave us the most truthful account we've heard. Mrs. Vaughn needed security to maintain her position. Mr. Cole needed financial stability. They found a mutually beneficial solution and built an actual relationship from it. I see nothing in the trust language that prohibits that. Caleb's face went red. You're letting sentiment cloud your judgment. No, Caleb, I'm recognizing that the trust required marriage, not a fairy tale. Your sister is married, legally, legitimately, and from what I can see, genuinely. That's all the trust demands. I want to vote, Caleb demanded, right now, on whether this marriage meets the spirit of the trust's intentions. The chairman looked around the table. All in favor of recognizing Marissa Vaughn Cole's marriage as legitimate and binding under the trust terms? 5 hands went up immediately. After a pause, a 6th joined. Motion carries. Marissa retains full control. This matter is closed. Caleb stood abruptly, chair scraping. This isn't over. I'll appeal. On what grounds? The chairman asked tiredly. You've investigated, interrogated, and insinuated. All you've proven is that 2 people found each other in unconventional circumstances and made it work. If that's a crime, half the marriages in this city are guilty. Caleb looked around the table, seeing his support evaporate. Without another word, he stormed out, the door slamming behind him with a finality that echoed through the room. The chairman turned to Ethan and Marissa. For what it's worth, I hope you make it work. Real marriages, the kind that last, are built on a lot less than what you two seem to have found. As they filed out, one of the older board members stopped beside Ethan. That took courage, son. Not many men would have been that honest. Didn't feel like I had a choice, Ethan admitted. The best truths rarely do. In the elevator down, Marissa stood rigid, staring at the descending numbers. Ethan couldn't read her expression, shock, anger, relief, all of the above. Marissa, not here, she said quietly. They made it to the car in silence. Marissa drove, knuckles white on the steering wheel, jaw set. Ethan waited, letting her process, dreading the explosion he felt building. They were halfway home when she finally spoke. What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking the truth was our only option. You just confessed to the entire board that we got married as a business transaction, and they didn't care. They saw through Caleb's manipulation. You had no right. We agreed to stick to the story. The story wasn't working. Caleb was tearing it apart piece by piece. The only way to beat him was to stop playing his game. Marissa pulled over abruptly, throwing the car into park. Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've exposed? Now everyone knows our marriage started as an arrangement. The press will have a field day. Let them. We won. The board voted in your favor. Caleb lost. For now, but you've given every news outlet ammunition to paint us as frauds. We were already being painted as frauds. Ethan's patience finally snapped. At least now we're honest frauds. At least now we don't have to keep track of which lies we told to whom. You don't get it, Marissa said, voice breaking. This company is all I have, and you just made our marriage, made us, into a public spectacle. Your company isn't all you have. You have people who care about you. You have Sophie, who adores you. You have... He stopped. The next word's too dangerous. What? What else do I have? Me, Ethan said quietly. If you want it. Marissa stared at him, breathing hard, tears finally spilling over. I can't want it. Don't you see? Everyone will say I manipulated you, that I used you, that this whole thing is just what Caleb accused us of. I don't care what everyone says. Well, I do. I care that my father built something good, and I'm turning it into a circus. I care that Sophie got in a fight because of us. I care that you just put yourself on the line for a relationship that might not survive next week, or might survive a lifetime. You don't know that. Neither do you, but we'll never find out if you keep running from it. Marissa wiped her eyes angrily. I'm not running. I'm being realistic. You're being scared. Damn right I'm scared. Scared of losing everything. Scared of hurting you. Scared of this... She gestured between them. Whatever this is, becoming another thing I failed at. Ethan reached across the console, caught her hand. You haven't failed. You fought for your company and won. You built a relationship with Sophie. You let me in even though everything in you said not to. That's not failure. That's courage. It doesn't feel like courage. It never does. Courage feels like being terrified and doing it anyway. They sat there in the parked car, hands joined, both of them trembling with adrenaline and emotion. Marissa's phone buzzed with what was probably her lawyer, probably reporters, probably 100 fires that needed putting out. She ignored it. What do we do now? She asked. We go home. We check on Sophie. We figure out the rest as we go. That's not much of a plan. It's the only one I've got. Marissa almost smiled, the expression watery but genuine. You're very bad at strategic planning. Good thing I married someone who isn't. The word, married, hung between them differently now. Not an arrangement, not a performance. Just a fact, complicated and messy and real. They drove the rest of the way in silence, but this time it felt different. Lighter somehow, despite everything. Sophie was in the living room with Mrs. Chen when they got home. She looked up anxiously when they entered. Are you in trouble? She asked immediately. No, sweetheart, Ethan said, pulling her into a hug. Everything's okay. Promise? Promise. Mrs. Chen excused herself with knowing eyes and a pat on Marissa's shoulder. After she left, Sophie looked between the two adults. Did the mean people say more mean things? Some of them, Marissa admitted, sitting beside Sophie, but the important people, the ones who matter, they understood. Good. Sophie leaned against Marissa with the easy affection she'd developed over their weeks together. I don't like when people are mean to you. I don't like it either, but you know what? Sometimes mean people help us figure out what's really important. What's really important? Marissa glanced at Ethan, something vulnerable and honest in her expression. Family. Even the ones we choose instead of the ones we're born with. Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer. She chattered about her day before the fight, about a book she was reading, normal kid things that felt like a balm after the intensity of the board meeting. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Ethan found Marissa in her office again, but this time she wasn't working. She was just sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. Hey, he said softly from the doorway. Hey, you okay? I don't know, Ask me tomorrow. Ethan came in, sat in the chair across from her desk. For what it's worth, I meant what I said in there, about not being able to tell where the arrangement ended. I know you did. That's what scares me. Why? Marissa was quiet for a long moment. Because I can't either, and I've spent 10 years building walls to protect myself. You walked in and dismantled them in weeks. I didn't mean to. I know. That's what makes it worse. You weren't trying to get past my defenses. You just did, by being honest and stubborn and impossible to lie to. That's the nicest insult I've ever received. Marissa finally smiled, genuine and warm. Don't let it go to your head. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only came from knowing someone beyond their carefully constructed facades. What happens now? Marissa asked eventually. Do we keep pretending this is temporary? Is it? I don't know. Is it? Ethan thought about the question seriously, thought about Sophie's attachment, about the routines they'd built, about the way his chest tightened when Marissa smiled, thought about going back to the small house, to the life before Marissa, and found he couldn't imagine it anymore. I don't want it to be, he said. Marissa's breath caught. Ethan, I'm not saying we have to decide everything tonight, but I'm saying I want to try. Actually try, not just for appearances or contracts or trust clauses. Try because I want to see where this goes. That's terrifying. Yeah. And complicated. Yeah. And might blow up in both our faces. Probably. Marissa laughed, shaky and incredulous. You're supposed to talk me out of being scared, not agree with all my worst fears. I'm not going to lie to you about the risks, but I'm also not going to pretend I don't think it's worth it. She stood, came around the desk, and Ethan rose to meet her. They stood close, the familiar electricity between them now acknowledged instead of denied. I'm not good at this, Marissa whispered. At relationships. At letting people in. At being anything other than what's expected. Good thing I don't expect anything except honesty. I can try to give you that. That's all I'm asking. Marissa leaned forward, rested her forehead against his. This is crazy. Most good things are. We started with a lie. We're building toward truth. That has to count for something. She kissed him then, soft and uncertain and real. Not performance, not strategy, just two people choosing each other despite every reason not to. When they finally broke apart, Marissa said, I should warn you. I'm terrible at being a wife. I work too much. I'm controlling. I don't know how to turn off my brain. And I'm a broke contractor with a kid and trust issues, Ethan interrupted. Sounds like we're evenly matched. This isn't a fairy tale. Good. Fairy tales end. I'm looking for something that lasts. Marissa's eyes filled again, but this time she was smiling through it. When did you get so good with words? Desperation makes poets of us all. They went upstairs together, and for the first time since this whole thing started, sharing a bed didn't feel like part of an arrangement. It felt like a choice they were both making, with full knowledge of the risks and complications ahead. As Ethan drifted toward sleep, Marissa's hand found his in the darkness. Thank you, she whispered, for today, for being honest when I couldn't. We're a team now. That's what teams do. Are we? A team? Yeah, I think we are. The next morning would bring new challenges. Press coverage of Ethan's confession, probably more attacks from Caleb, definitely more complications to navigate. But for now, in the quiet darkness of a bedroom that was finally starting to feel like theirs, they had this. Honest, messy, real. And somehow, against all odds, it was enough. Morning arrived with headlines that were surprisingly kinder than Ethan expected. Instead of scandal and outrage, most outlets ran with a different angle. The unconventional love story, the honesty in admitting to practical beginnings, the courage it took to stand before a board and confess the truth. Human interest pieces instead of hit jobs. Huh, Ethan said, scrolling through his phone over coffee while Sophie ate cereal at the counter. What? Marissa asked, looking up from her own tablet where she'd been bracing for disaster. They're calling us refreshingly honest. One article says we're challenging traditional marriage narratives. You're kidding. There's a quote from the chairman saying more couples should be this transparent about why they actually get married. Marissa took his phone, read the article with increasing disbelief. I don't understand. I thought we'd be crucified. Apparently, honesty is novel enough to be interesting instead of scandalous. Sophie looked between them, syrup on her chin. Does this mean the mean people stopped being mean? Some of them, Ethan said, wiping her face with a napkin. But there will always be mean people, sweetheart. The trick is not letting them decide how your story goes. Did you decide how your story goes? The question was so innocent, so direct, that both adults paused. Marissa met Ethan's eyes across the kitchen, something unspoken passing between them. We're trying to, Marissa said softly. Every day. The doorbell rang before Sophie could ask more questions. Ethan answered it to find a courier with a thick envelope marked urgent. Inside was a legal document. Caleb was filing an appeal, claiming the board's decision was made under duress and emotional manipulation. He's not giving up, Marissa said, reading over Ethan's shoulder. Did we think he would? No, but I'd hoped. Her lawyer called 30 seconds later. The appeal is weak, he assured her. Caleb's grasping at straws. But it'll drag things out another few months, keep you in legal limbo. Can we fight it? We can, but Marissa, I think there might be another option. What kind of option? Caleb wants the company. He spent years positioning himself as the heir apparent. What if you gave him a piece of it? Marissa's expression went cold. Absolutely not. Hear me out. Not control, not decision-making power, but a minority stake with profit sharing, enough to satisfy his ego without compromising your authority. It might be enough to make him back off. I'm not rewarding his behavior. You're ending a war. There's a difference. After hanging up, Marissa paced the kitchen with barely contained fury. He wants me to give Caleb a piece of my father's company after everything he's done. It's not the worst idea, Ethan said carefully. She whirled on him. You're taking his side? I'm taking your side, which means I'm asking if this fight is worth what it's costing you, us, Sophie. The company is everything. No, Ethan interrupted gently. It's important. It's meaningful. But it's not everything. Not anymore. Marissa opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. She looked at Sophie, still eating breakfast and humming to herself, oblivious to the adult complications swirling around her. Looked at Ethan, who'd put himself on the line repeatedly for a relationship that started as a transaction. Looked around the kitchen that had become filled with life in the weeks they'd been together. I need to think, she said finally. Take your time. But time wasn't a luxury they had. 2 days later, Caleb's appeal was formally filed, and with it came a new wave of media attention. This time the coverage wasn't kind. Stories about family feuds, questions about whether the company was stable, speculation about internal conflicts affecting business decisions. Marissa's phone rang constantly with concerned investors, nervous clients, board members asking when this would finally end. She handled each call with professional composure, but Ethan saw the toll it took. The tension in her shoulders, the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she worked later and later each night. On the third night, he found her at her desk at 2 a.m, staring at financial projections that probably didn't need her attention. Come to bed, he said from the doorway. I can't. I need to prepare for the depositions next week. You need sleep. I need to win. Ethan walked over, gently closed her laptop despite her protest. You've already won. The board voted in your favor. Your marriage is legitimate. Your control is secure. Not while Caleb's appeal is pending. Then let's end the appeal. Marissa looked up sharply. How? Give him what he wants. Not the company, but enough to make him feel like he won something. Your lawyer was right. End the war. That feels like losing. It feels like choosing what matters. Ethan pulled up a chair, sat across from her. You told Sophie that mean people help us figure out what's important. So what's important to you? Really important? Marissa was quiet for a long moment. The company was important because it was all I had to prove I mattered, that I was worth something beyond my father's name. And now? Now I have... She stopped, emotion catching in her throat. Now I have more than that. I have Sophie asking me to help with her homework. I have you making coffee the way I like it without asking. I have a life that exists outside boardrooms and balance sheets. So keep that life, protect it, even if it means compromising on the company. Caleb doesn't deserve. This isn't about what Caleb deserves. It's about what you deserve. Peace, stability, a future that isn't consumed by legal battles. Marissa's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for days. I'm so tired, Ethan, tired of fighting, tired of proving myself, tired of this never being enough. Then stop, just stop. And do what? Live. Actually live instead of just surviving. She broke then, really broke, and Ethan pulled her into his arms while she cried years of exhaustion and fear and pressure onto his shoulder. He held her, steady and certain, until the storm passed and she pulled back with a shaky laugh. I'm a mess, she said, wiping her eyes. You're human. There's a difference. When did you become so wise? Around the same time I married a woman I barely knew and accidentally fell in love with her. The words slipped out before Ethan could stop them. The air in the room went still. Marissa stared at him, eyes wide. What did you say? Ethan could backtrack, could claim exhaustion, could laugh it off. Instead, he doubled down on honesty. I love you. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you played Go Fish with Sophie. Maybe when you stood up to Caleb. Maybe that first night when you showed up desperate and soaking wet. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being an arrangement and became the realest thing in my life. Ethan, you don't have to say it back. I know this is complicated and messy and probably too soon. But I'm done pretending I don't feel it. Marissa's hands came up to frame his face, her touch gentle and reverent. You incredible, impossible man. I've been in love with you for weeks and terrified to admit it because it meant admitting I needed someone. Admitting I couldn't do this alone. You don't have to do it alone. Not anymore. She kissed him then, deep and certain, and it felt like coming home to a place he hadn't known he was looking for. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marissa said, I'm going to call my lawyer in the morning. Offer Caleb a minority stake in exchange for dropping the appeal and signing a non-interference agreement. You're sure? No, but I'm trusting that this, us, is worth more than winning. They went to bed together, and for the first time since this whole thing started, Ethan felt like they were building towards something instead of just surviving through something. The next morning, Marissa made the call. Her lawyer was surprised but supportive. They drafted an offer, 15% stake with profit sharing but no voting rights or operational input, contingent on Caleb dropping all legal challenges and signing an agreement to not interfere with company decisions. He'll probably reject it, Marissa said after they sent it over. His ego won't let him accept anything less than control. But 3 hours later, Caleb's lawyer called back. He was accepting the offer. Just like that? Marissa asked, stunned. Just like that, her lawyer confirmed. My guess? The board made it clear they wouldn't support further challenges. He's cutting his losses and taking what he can get. After hanging up, Marissa sat very still, processing. It's over. The fight is actually over. How do you feel? Relieved. Angry that it took this long. Grateful it didn't take longer. She looked at Ethan. Scared about what comes next. What do you mean? We got married to save the company. Now that the company is safe, what reason do we have to stay married? Ethan's heart clenched. I thought we already answered that question. We said we wanted to try, but wanting and actually doing are different things. Are you having second thoughts? I'm having realistic thoughts. We built this relationship under extraordinary circumstances. What happens when things are ordinary, when it's just daily life and no external pressure forcing us together? It was a fair question, one Ethan had been avoiding himself. I guess we find out. And if it doesn't work, then at least we'll know we tried, really tried, not just for contracts or trust clauses, but because we wanted to. Marissa nodded slowly. Okay, so we try. We try. The legal paperwork took 2 weeks to finalize. During that time, life settled into something that almost resembled normal. Ethan worked on Marissa's renovation projects, real work for real pay. Sophie continued school, the incident largely forgotten by her classmates who'd moved on to other dramas. Marissa handled the company without constant legal fires to extinguish. and slowly, carefully, they learned how to be married without the crisis holding them together. It wasn't always easy. Marissa struggled with giving up control, with asking for help instead of handling everything herself. Ethan struggled with feeling like he belonged in her world, with accepting that his place beside her wasn't charity or convenience, but choice. They argued about small things, how to load the dishwasher, whether Sophie should have more screen time, whose turn it was to grocery shop. Normal couple arguments that felt strange after months of high-stakes drama. "Is this what regular marriage is like?" Marissa asked one night after a particularly heated debate about whether they needed a new couch. "I think so. Less exciting than board meetings and legal battles." "I don't know if I'm good at boring." "Neither do I, but we could learn together." Sophie, for her part, seemed thrilled with the stability. She'd stopped asking whether things were permanent, stopped testing whether Marissa would still be there tomorrow. She just accepted it as fact. This was her family now, imperfect and unconventional and real. One Saturday afternoon, about a month after Caleb accepted the settlement, Ethan was working in his workshop when Marissa appeared in the doorway. She'd been at the office all morning but had come home early, something unusual enough to make him set down his tools. "Everything okay?" he asked. "I was thinking about something." Dangerous habit. She smiled despite herself. "Remember when you said some foundations aren't rushed, they're chosen?" "Yeah. I want to choose this foundation, properly, not because of a trust clause or a deadline, but because I want to." Ethan's heart started beating faster. "What are you saying?" Marissa pulled a small box from her pocket, opened it to reveal a simple gold band, masculine, understated, exactly what he would have chosen for himself. "I'm saying we already have the legal marriage, but I'd like the real one too. The one where we stand in front of people we care about and promise to keep choosing each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." "Marissa, I know we're already married. I know this is backward and unconventional and probably unnecessary. But I want you to have a ring that means something, that reminds you this isn't an arrangement anymore." Ethan crossed the workshop, sawdust still on his hands, and pulled her close. "You're proposing to me?" "I'm recommitting to you. Is there a difference?" "Not one that matters." She slid the ring onto his finger and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. She'd probably measured his other hand while he was sleeping. "So is that a yes?" Marissa asked. "That's a yes to everything. The ring, the recommitment, the choosing each other, all of it." They kissed surrounded by lumber and power tools, and it felt more romantic than any fancy dinner could have been. That night, they told Sophie about their plan to have a small ceremony, just close friends and family, nothing elaborate, just a chance to celebrate what they'd built. "Does this mean you're getting married again?" Sophie asked, confused. "We're already married," Marissa explained. "But we got married so quickly the first time we didn't get to celebrate properly. This is the celebration." "Can I be in it?" "Of course. We were hoping you'd be our witness." Sophie beamed. "I've never been a witness before. What do I have to do?" "Just stand with us and promise to remember that we chose this, chose each other, chose to be a family." "That's easy. I already remember that." The ceremony was simple, held in the garden of the mansion on a Saturday afternoon in early autumn. Mrs. Chen was there, along with Marissa's lawyer who'd become something of a friend through the ordeal, a few of Ethan's crew from the workshop, and a handful of Marissa's colleagues who'd supported her through Caleb's challenges. Caleb wasn't invited. Neither were most of the board members. This wasn't about business or appearances. It was about the small circle of people who'd seen them through the mess and stayed anyway. They'd written their own vows. Ethan went first, hands slightly shaking as he held Marissa's. "When you showed up at my door, I saw someone desperate enough to trust a stranger. What I didn't see was someone strong enough to build something real from that desperation. You taught me that foundations can be rushed and still hold, that honesty is harder and more important than perfection, that love doesn't always look like we expect it to. I promise to keep choosing you, even when it's complicated, especially when it's complicated." Marissa's voice trembled as she spoke. "I spent 10 years building walls to protect myself. You walked in and made me want to tear them down. You saw me at my worst, desperate, manipulative, terrified, and stayed anyway. You didn't try to fix me or change me. You just stood beside me and reminded me I didn't have to do everything alone. I promise to keep letting you in, to keep trusting that together is better than perfect, to keep choosing this messy, honest, real thing we've built." So Sophie, standing between them in a new dress she'd picked out herself, said solemnly, "I promise to remember you chose this, and also that you both promised to love me too, even though you didn't say it out loud." Marissa laughed through tears. "We absolutely promise that too." The officiant, a friend of Mrs. Chen's who'd agreed to do the ceremony, pronounced them married again, and when Ethan kissed Marissa this time, it was without any audience to perform for, without any agenda beyond the simple truth of two people who'd found each other in the chaos and decided to stay. The small reception afterward was relaxed, full of laughter, and stories about how they'd met that were now safe to tell truthfully. Mrs. Chen regaled everyone with tales of Sophie's early questions about Marissa. The workshop crew teased Ethan about how distracted he'd been those first few weeks. Marissa's colleagues admitted they'd had bets on how long the marriage would last, and all of them had lost because no one had predicted it would become real. As the afternoon shifted toward evening and guests started leaving, Ethan found Marissa standing alone near the garden's edge, looking back at the house. "Having regrets?" he asked, coming up beside her. "The opposite. I'm trying to remember what this house felt like before, when it was just me and empty rooms and the weight of my father's expectations. And now? Now it feels like a home. Sophie's drawings on the fridge, your tools in the garage, signs of life everywhere. You could have had that without me, you know, without any of this." Marissa turned to face him. "No, I couldn't. I was too locked in my own patterns, too afraid to let anyone close enough to make it messy. You didn't give me a choice about the mess. You just walked in and made everything complicated, and somehow that made it real." "Complicated is our specialty." "Apparently so." Sophie ran over, grass stains on her dress and cake frosting on her face. "Can we do this every year? Have a party where everyone tells stories about us?" "We can do whatever we want," Ethan said, scooping her up. "That's the nice thing about making our own rules." "I like our rules," Sophie declared. "They're weird, but they work." "Best description of this family I've heard," Marissa said, ruffling Sophie's hair. That night, after Sophie was asleep and the caterers had cleaned up, Ethan and Marissa sat on their bedroom balcony with wine, looking out over the grounds. "What do you think happens now?" Marissa asked. "We've solved the company crisis, done the ceremony, chosen each other officially. What's the next chapter?" "I don't know. Living, I guess. The boring, beautiful, ordinary kind." "You think we're capable of ordinary?" "I think we're capable of anything if we do it together." Marissa leaned against him, comfortable and certain. "I love you. I don't think I've said it enough." "You've said it plenty. But I'll never get tired of hearing it." "Good, because I plan on saying it a lot." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars appear over the city, and Ethan thought about how far they'd come from that desperate night when Marissa had shown up needing a husband by morning. How they'd built something real from something fake, something lasting from something rushed. "Ethan?" Marissa said quietly. "Yeah?" "Thank you for saying yes. That first night, when I asked for something impossible, thank you for not laughing me out of your house. Thank you for trusting me with something impossible, for seeing past the broke contractor to someone who might actually be able to help. You did more than help. You saved me. We saved each other. And in the end, that was the truth of it. Not a fairy tale where one person rescued another, but a partnership where two desperate people found each other and built something neither could have built alone." The next morning, Ethan woke to find Marissa already up, standing at the window in her robe, looking thoughtful. "What's on your mind?" he asked, voice still rough with sleep. "I want to step back from the company a bit. Not quit, just delegate more. Hire a COO, actually take weekends off, be present for the life we're building." "You sure? The company was everything for so long. It was everything because I didn't have anything else. Now I do. Now I have reasons to come home instead of reasons to stay at work until midnight." What brought this on? Marissa turned to face him. "Yesterday, during the ceremony, I realized I've spent 10 years building my father's legacy and not enough time building my own. This, us, Sophie, the family we're creating, this is my legacy too. And I don't want to miss it because I'm too busy proving myself to people who don't matter." Ethan got up, crossed to her, pulled her close. You know Sophie's going to demand even more of your time if you're around more. Good. I want to be the one who helps with homework and makes dinner and argues about bedtime. I want to be fully in this life, not just visiting it between business crises. Then do it. Build the life you actually want instead of the one you think you should have. Is it really that simple? Probably not, but we can try to make it that simple. Over the next few months, Marissa did exactly that. She hired a talented COO, started leaving work at reasonable hours, actually took weekends to spend with Ethan and Sophie. At first it felt strange. She'd catch herself reaching for her phone to check emails, feeling guilty about not being at the office. But slowly, she learned to be present, learned to enjoy Saturday morning pancakes with Sophie without thinking about Monday meetings, learned to work on renovation plans with Ethan without her mind drifting to quarterly reports. Ethan's workshop thrived with the steady contracts from Marissa's properties, and he hired 2 additional workers to help with the expanding workload. He paid off the mortgage, rebuilt his savings, and stopped waking up in panic about money. But the best part wasn't financial stability. It was the small moments, teaching Sophie how to hammer nails straight, watching Marissa learn to cook without burning things. The 3 of them piled on the couch for movie nights, the ordinary magic of a life built together. 6 months after their recommitment ceremony, Ethan came home from the workshop to find Marissa and Sophie in the kitchen, covered in flour and giggling over what looked like a failed attempt at cookies. "What happened here?" he asked, surveying the disaster. "We're baking," Sophie announced proudly. "That's one word for it." Marissa laughed, flour in her hair and on her face, looking more relaxed than Ethan had ever seen her. "The recipe said easy. The recipe lied." "Come here," Ethan said, pulling out his phone. "Let me get a picture of this." "Don't you dare!" But he was already snapping photos, capturing Marissa and Sophie's flour-covered faces, their matching expressions of delighted chaos, the mess they'd created together. Later that night, after they'd cleaned up the kitchen and put Sophie to bed, Marissa found those photos on Ethan's phone. "You're keeping these?" she asked. "Of course, this is what happiness looks like. We look like disasters. We look like a family." Marissa stared at the photos, something soft in her expression. "I never thought I'd have this. The mess, the chaos, the ordinary beautiful disasters. And now? Now I can't imagine anything else." A year after that first desperate night, they held a small party to celebrate their first official anniversary, counting from their recommitment ceremony rather than the rushed courthouse wedding. Friends and family gathered again in the garden, and this time Caleb was invited. He came surprisingly, though he stayed on the edges of the party, uncomfortable and out of place. Near the end of the evening, he approached Marissa. "I owe you an apology," he said stiffly. Marissa blinked, shocked. "Excuse me?" "I was wrong. About the marriage, about Ethan, about everything. I let jealousy make me cruel." "What changed?" Caleb glanced toward where Ethan was showing Sophie how to work the grill. "I've been watching you this past year. You're happy. Actually, happy, not just successful. I don't think I've ever seen you happy before." "I wasn't. Not really." "I know. And I'm sorry I tried to take this from you. Sorry I couldn't see past my own bitterness to be happy you'd found something real." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest. Marissa nodded slowly. "Thank you. That means something. For what it's worth, Ethan's good for you. Better than I wanted to admit." "He is." Caleb left shortly after, and Marissa suspected they'd never be close, but maybe they didn't have to be enemies either. As the party wound down and stars appeared overhead, the 3 of them, Ethan, Marissa, and Sophie, stood together near the garden's edge. "Make a wish," Sophie said, pointing at the first star. "What should we wish for?" Marissa asked. "More of this," Sophie said simply. "More days like today." Ethan pulled them both close. "I don't think we need to wish for that. I think we just need to keep choosing it." "Then I wish we keep choosing it," Sophie amended. "Deal," Marissa said, kissing the top of her head. They stood there as guests departed, as the evening faded into night, as the life they'd built together settled around them like a warm blanket. Ethan thought back to that first night, standing at his door looking at a desperate woman with a duffel bag and an impossible request. He'd said yes because he was desperate too, because he needed what she offered, because he saw in her eyes something he recognized, someone fighting to survive. He'd never imagined that survival would turn into this, into love and laughter and ordinary disasters in a kitchen, into a daughter who now had a mother figure she adored, into a partnership that was messy and complicated and more real than anything he'd built before. "What are you thinking?" Marissa asked, leaning against him. "That some foundations really aren't rushed, they're chosen." "And they last?" "Yeah, they last." Sophie tugged on both their hands. "Can we go inside? I'm tired." They walked into the house together, into the warm light and comfortable chaos, into the life they'd built from desperation and choice and stubborn refusal to give up on each other. Ethan Cole, single dad and contractor, the man no one expected to matter, had learned the truth at last. Some foundations are built in crisis and tested by fire. Some start with lies and become the most honest things you've ever known. Some are rushed and complicated and imperfect. And sometimes those are exactly the foundations that last forever. Because they're not built on fairy tales or perfect timing or ideal circumstances. They're built on two people standing together and saying yes to the mess, yes to the complications, yes to choosing each other even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And in the end, that choice, that daily, deliberate, honest choice, was worth more than any trust clause, any company, any perfectly planned life could ever be. It was worth everything.